Hello and welcome back to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me today, I've got the usual crew here once again. We've got Josh Torres.
It's been 7 days, 12 hours, 31 minutes, and 52 seconds since we last spoke.
We've got George Foster.
Hello, everyone.
We've got Adam Vitale.
Hey, guys.
And James Galizio.
No cereal this time.
So last week we had kind of a smaller podcast, but we took the extra time to talk a lot about Outriders and a few other games. It'll probably be a lot of the same cadence this week. We have a few surprising news bits, but not too many. A few release dates were announced as we slowly filter in the schedule for the summer months. And again, we're going to focus on games that we've been playing. And I actually have something to contribute to this week for once. But I'm going to let someone else go first. Not Adam, because I made him go first twice in a row. So that leaves George, Josh, or James. That's hard to say in a row.
Well, if you don't want to go first, then I can't go first either, because you and I are going to talk.
I'll go first. I'll get to the plate.
All right, George. What have you been up to?
Are you okay, George?
Yeah, I'm okay. The big one. Last week I talked about it a bit. I have actually now finished Disco Elysium.
Final.
So
cut.
you were waiting for the big patch is basically what you're doing, right? Which finally came out.
So I was kind of hoping. So spoilers alert. It not to do with the game, but it didn't fix a lot.
The patch that went down for the PS5, right? The PS5 version.
Yeah. Patch 1.2. It fixed enough, so I was actually able to finish the game. And before I believe you can finish it, but like it really is to your detriment if you decide to do that, because it like locks a key item that you actually kind of need to like not get the good ending, but you do want to get it. And there's another glitch as well. I think people are referring to it as the pigs glitch, just because it's to do with this one character. That one's been like not fixed, but there's a workaround, so you can now do it if you want to. It's still kind of a mess. Like I'm really sad to say that like it's such an amazing game. It is.
Is there any? Can you describe it in a way that doesn't spoil it for people, or is it such a spoiler heavy like instance of what's still broken or what's been fixed that it's hard to describe?
Okay, I can do it spoiler free. I'm gonna like just rattle off some of the things I've experienced.
Okay.
So I've had soft crashes. So I've had like the game freeze up and I've had to crash it myself. I've had hard crashes where the game's just gone, nope, this doesn't work now. The pigs glitch, basically, you at kind of an important moment, you run into this character, and unless you wait behind the gate and aim at them yourself and then click on them, you will glitch and it will like freeze the conversation, so you can't progress. You can go into your menu, but you can't get out of it, so you're just stuck there. There's the car glitch where there's an important item hidden in the car, but the car is still textureless, and you have to like initiate a conversation after waiting on a swing to get it to work. What other stuff? Oh, there's all the political quests. The one that I chose, which I think is the moralist one, it's glitched right at the end after like an hour of progress.
Oh, man.
It just glitches. Yeah, so
I'm more disappointed by the fact you went moralist than the fact that it's glitched.
I know. I was really boring. I didn't really think about it too much. I actually, funnily enough, they're woven in so well that I didn't realize they were like the new content until I came back after finishing it just to clear some stuff up, just to like get back into that world as soon as possible. I was like, oh man, that must be one of the new quests. They're done really well, and I want to go back and do the others, but at this point, I'm kind of just like, I can't be bothered. Like, why would I go back into it when it's almost definitely going to be glitched as well? I'm now at the point of like, I'm going to sit and wait until patch 1.3, and then I'll do another playthrough because I love this game.
Do they have an ETA on the patch 1.3?
They're working on it. They've announced that it's coming. Yeah, so maybe a week, maybe a month. Who knows?
Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I really want to keep playing it. Like I've never come out of the game and instantly gone, okay, yeah, I want to do this again. Well, maybe like Last of Us Part 2, but like since then, not for ages. I adore this game. It is to me,
And you feel
10
that
out of
way
10 game.
even with the glitches.
It's
Even with the glitches, yeah, it is a masterpiece completely. I'm stuck in a rock and hard place. Like I fought to review this game. Well, I didn't fight to review the game. I really wanted to review the game. I was like, yeah, like I really want to play this. I feel like I'll vibe with it. And now I'm like, I've cursed myself because I'm gonna have to be the one to say, don't buy it right now. Like it's an amazing game. Don't buy it.
Or buy it on PC.
I think it's still kind of a bit screwed on the PC as well. Like that's the problem.
I've heard that the final cut on PC is a lot more finicky than the original release.
It is
first-hand
finicky,
experience though.
But I will say that at least the car issue you were talking about, I literally did that yesterday, and the car is fully textured.
I think it's still the same result either way. Like that Final Cut right now, like no matter how you go about it, it still has problems on both platforms that it's on right now. I would say just wait on it. Like it's a shame, but it's one of those things. Like they probably should have delayed it then.
Yeah, I would have
preferred
preferred
the
that.
case. Like it seems like it launched pretty hot.
The thing is, even like Brian was saying, even with all the glitches, I wouldn't say it's broken. I wouldn't go as far to say like I don't think it's in an acceptable state, but like I still managed to finish the game. And when I really zoomed out and looked at the stuff that was like going wrong, the crashes didn't really bug me all that much because there's quick saves quite a lot. And this comes off as very like trying to defend the game. I know it comes off as like like, oh no, it didn't break that badly for me. Like it's fine. Like it's not fine. It should be in better condition. But I would still recommend it. I would definitely still say to people, yeah, it's totally playable. It's still absolutely incredible. It's just when you get to a certain point, maybe look online how to get past that bit.
Or my recommendation that from all I've heard so far is like, why don't you just wait a few months and by then it'll be at a cheaper price probably or go on sale.
Yeah,
it'll probably at a better state.
That's it. It's running around in circles after myself because I want to shout from the rooftops that this is one of the best games I've played and that this is a game like that has instantly hit my all-time list. Like I finished it and I was like, yeah, wow, oh my god. In the same way as stuff like Hades and Last of Us, just to name like recent examples. But then, I think I've made pretty clear here, I can't really fully recommend it yet. My review for it will be coming out soon. I was sat kind of waiting around in the same way of like, I'm going to sit and wait around for the patch to come out to actually play it. Then I played it, and I think I'm just going to have to write it up. It's still going to be a positive review. I think I definitely, the good outweighs the bad. The bad is just kind of disappointing.
Well, we've talked on the podcast before that it's hard to review. Like you want to factor your experience with these ways that you have to work around bugs and things like that, and all the crashes you've had. Those have to factor in, but to what extent, to what volume level? That's kind of one of those things that there really is no set rubric that you must adhere to. Because what if you write a review, let's say by the end of April, but then by next year the game is in a perfectly almost flawless state. Like you don't want to date your review by banging it too hard, but you also don't want to ignore the problems and act like they're not there. And it's no right answer for that. It's always
that just happened very recently for me back in January, February when I did the East 9 Monstrum Nox review for PS5. Like before that actually launched to the public, like the code that we got, and this is pretty prevalent for the running it on PS5, was like that game crashed a lot. And it was one of those things like, and I would really like to like love this game. And I think I do still, but it's just my first experience with it running through that was like, that was a lot of crashes. And then so we basically had to go contact This America and be like, this is what's happening, and working with them. And then they said, okay, there'll be a patch out either by the time of release or around release. It's like, can we take their word for it? Luckily in that situation, it was able to be patched out or fix all those crashing issues by the time it released publicly. So like my score didn't those crashes didn't really factor into the score a little bit. Like I did mention it, like just giving a word of warning, and luckily, by release day we were able to like put an addendum to that recent review saying like, hey, this is what This America said, and then by that time, luckily the vast majority of people who played it don't have to worry about that. So it's one of those things, right, where this situation is different because this game is already publicly available and these things are still happening to the majority that are vastly playing. Unlike in my situation, only people who are either reviewing it or got an early copy through whatever means that was only happening to them.
Yeah, my most similar experience was when I reviewed Pathfinder Kingmaker, and it was incredibly buggy on release. And I've played plenty of RPGs early or pre-release where you have quests that bug or certain flags that don't trigger, because you like certain Bethesda games like Skyrim or whatever, not all of the quest permutations are always like figured out where you might like lock yourself out of a certain thing. But in Kingmaker's case, like I could not even see the ending. I had like bugged it where I could not complete the game. So of course I wrote a pretty dour review on it. But then over the next year, the developer there like really tuned it up and really kind of put out like weekly hot fixes and patches and updates, and they never let it rest. So I kind of felt obligated, and I revisited the game a year later and wrote basically another feature saying, okay, like here is me, quote unquote, re-reviewing. I didn't score it again because at that point the score doesn't matter, but it's like, okay, let me play the game as it was intended with kind of all the technical details pushed aside. So hopefully that's not what you have to do for Disco Elysium Final Cut. But like not every situation is different. The pre-release bugs, a game that takes a year to fix, maybe Disco Elysium will only take a couple months. Who knows?
I think what it comes down to for me is the importance of a score, right? Like if you read my review, I'm sure you can see through the cracks and say like, yeah, this is a game that like George loves. George would recommend this to every person in the world. Wow, weird saying third person. But like, my review is going to be very, very positive with the caveat of like at the end, like, but here's like why you shouldn't get it right now, and here's some of the issues of it currently. Like, but then if that affects a score, there are going to be those people who go, oh, 7, 8. Oh, guess that's not like the game of the year everyone talks about. But then obviously, if you read it, you can garner my opinion more from it. So it's such a tricky place to be in. And if it were any other game, if it were a game I felt less passionately about, like say, I don't know, what's the game? Say Biomutant, for example. Say that comes out, that's glitched to heck. And I mean, maybe I love Biomutant, maybe that's a 10, I don't know. But say that's like, it would usually be an 8, but I'm bringing it down to a 7 because of how glitchy it is. Like, that wouldn't bug me so much. But with Disco Elysium, because it is so good, it makes it so much harder to have to like, it's like the teacher's pet. You don't want to tell the teacher's pet off. Like, it's doing such good work. I don't know.
Well, I kind of let's put aside the technical stuff for now, because I actually am I feel like I almost owe you maybe not an apology, but I paired it a couple times. Like Disco Elysium doesn't feel like a George game. Like I'm sitting here almost like soft betting that you're going to turn around and not gel with it, and apparently I was wrong. Like, or the implication was
I'm
wrong.
as surprised as you, honestly.
So I kind of want to hear, despite your experience, because you haven't played many games like this. Even you could argue there aren't many games like this. Period. But just even like an isometric RPG that's mostly focused on dialogue, but you still obviously took to it really well. I kind of want to hear like what your experience was like playing it, glitches aside.
So I think the main way that I got around, like, this is, as you said, this is not my type of game. But the characterization is so incredible. Even in games I've talked about in the past, like The Last of Us. I mean, that's such a weird example to jump to. The writing in that, which before I would have called like, oh my god, these are real people. I now look at Disco Elysium and I'm like, no, these are real people. Like this is like amazing. The conversations are so fluid and realistic, and the story is so genuinely interesting. There were so many moments where I was like, oh my god, yeah, like I get that. Like obviously it's a mystery, so there are bits where it is like, like aha, that typical moment. But then there are bits that are like completely go against your expectations, and I'm not going to spoil it, even though this is like, no, I won't spoil it. That I've talked to Adam about it, and we've both kind of had the same reaction of like, this is really smart how they tie it up, and it's like the greater meaning of it and the greater meaning of the world is so amazing. I feel like, have you ever read like a really, really, really good book that's like kind of changed? You're like, oh my god, that's the difference between a book and literature. That's how I feel about Disco Elysium.
I don't want to spoil it either, but broadly speaking, I feel like almost everything in Disco Elysium has a purpose. There is not just this is here because it's cool or whatever. There's so many parts of that game that are trying to tell a larger story or have higher meaning in terms of the developer is trying to say something, and it's really cool.
So I've been playing it too, and I think two thoughts. One, the absolute worst thing you can do with Disco Elysium is just try and mainline it, because you get way more out of it if you just try and like explore as much as you can, try and deal with as much as you can, even if it's like being nosy or whatnot. Um, the second thing, I don't know why I thought this, but when George brought up the book analogy, I was like, I'm pretty sure the world would be a much better place if everyone that the only book they've read is Harry Potter actually bothered to play through Disco Elysium.
It's also worth mentioning that the writer for this game literally is like the author of a novel. Like, so
You can tell,
like
can't
this
you?
this book is based off of like this world that he's written. Like, he is a novelist, so that sort of makes sense how that might be the feeling you've gotten from it.
I think as well, this gonna, because I realized looking back, I'm like, that sounds kind of pretentious the way I worded that, and I was like, that's cool though. Like, I like those moments where the prose in Disco Elysium is so great that you just want to like, and I did. You just screenshot it and you're like, wow, that's such an awesomely worded sentence. It's such a great way to describe something. I remember when you inspect the broken window at the start of the game, I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but it says something about it like almost looking like a smile, and I was just like, oh, this is what it's gonna be like the whole game. Just so many sentences that make you feel clever for reading them, and it's like that throughout the whole game. Just nothing is described as, oh, this is a, this is Revachol, this is the city. It's always described and like,
yeah, the descriptive text is fantastic.
Okay, so I'm gonna phrase this in a way that avoids spoiling it. But did you return the library card?
No.
Okay.
What did I miss?
Okay.
I know what you're referring to now. The docks, like the harbor sort of area, right?
You get a library card out of somebody's pocket, and that, fuck, man, fuck.
I like what you said earlier, George, where you mentioned that you like screenshotted the conversation. I just sat on that a bit because like I have a hard time describing like why something that is written is and how it is good. But I can tell you what I do when I read something that I know is good. And I know that's kind of maybe a cop out, but like a game that's mostly about reading, or in the case of the Final Cut, listening to dialogue, and you still like are screenshotting it as if it's like an action game, but you're screenshotting dialogue windows, and you don't like. I wasn't thinking twice about it, but I did that. I remember I tweeted a few times out. I haven't played the Final Cut, but the original release, because it is just so fun to read, and you're not skipping through dialogue, and you're not just looking at the choices and like gleaning like the broad strokes. Like, you're really invested in every, or at least most every character and what they're saying and how you should respond or how you want to respond.
I just, as well as that, I realized when I was going back to do that political quest, I was like, this world is just so relaxing. Like, even though you are trying to solve like a literal murder, and there are some really mature themes and like sour moments and some really depressing stuff. Like, it's just nice to play. Like, it's nice to just go around talking to people. It's nice to just clean up stuff in your task book and
or talk to the girl outside the bookstore.
Yeah. Like,
and it's a testament to how you can make such a small playable space interesting. Like, it's really only a smattering of buildings and like a few docks. And I guess when you go further west, it's a little bit more open. But they do so much with the playable space where like you almost measure what they put into the game by not number of characters or number of well, I don't know, map space or square. You can't even measure it in square miles, square feet.
Yeah, it's more narratively built vertically instead of horizontally, so to speak. Like there's a nice density to it, and but it feels manageable because it's such a confined space. So like it's not like, oh no, I have to go like 1,000 miles out, and then this is where the story is now, and you get a familiarity as you travel around that space. Which is really
I'm definitely not the first person to mention this, but people have made the comparison that like this is probably the case where Warren Spector mentioned a long time ago that he wanted to make like a city block game, like a game that takes place within a city block, and this is pretty much that.
Yeah,
Warren Spector being the creator of Deus Ex and a lot of other stuff.
It's that like I could literally now you've got me started. It's kind of hard to like when someone says, "Why do you like this game?" It's like, oh, how do I even begin? But now I'm started. I'm like, I could go on forever. I won't because there's other stuff to talk about. But I think one of the final things I'll say about the Final Cut, is that it makes failure fun in a way that I've never really thought about in a game before. Like, you can mess up and you will mess up, and you can do whatever you want. You can quick save and then load and then try again, but it's so much more fun if you just go, well, I'm not good at this, so I'll try it, and if it doesn't work, it's going to be a funny scene, then I'll find another workaround. And I'm just finding out now there are so many different ways to complete the game, as well as just like playing through it. Like you can completely ignore the body if you want to. If you want to just like go out the back, maybe bet the tracks, you can just do that. You don't have to look at the body at all.
Yeah, apparently that was a new achievement that they had with the Final Cut, which was solve the murder without inspecting the body.
That's what I'm going to try and do.
Bitch, yeah. I'm in. Like, I'm going to try that.
That's pretty cool.
What sort of cop did you end up as?
Well, at first I was the sorry cop because I was
a sorry cop.
Yeah, and then I was like, no, I'm not doing
for
this. Yeah. And then I was just like, I really put my points into like empathy. And that again, it's so powerful. Like some of the text that comes up when you're talking to people, it is just like, it's emotional. You're reading it and you're like, oh wow, like I feel like I have a deeper understanding. It sounds really cringe, but like you read it and it makes you understand other people better as well. You're like, oh, I've seen that emotion before. Like I've seen people emote like that. I've been in this sort of situation where I thought that as well. It's just like mind blowing.
That going back to the library card, empathy pulls a lot of weight there. There's like a few parts of that conversation that I screenshotted, and it's just like, man.
I'm gonna have to go back now. You're gonna make me play it again, James. Damn it! I've just finished. It took me I want to say about 20 hours to do, but I'll be down if I don't go for the platinum. Like
Did you go?
I'm in there.
Here's another question: did you go into the church?
Yes, I turned that church into a cool place. That's all I'll say.
Before we move on, like I just want to say that if you're starting to develop like a craving for this kind of stuff, like if you ever want to like go back and like get like a similar experience with a different game, like definitely check out Planescape Torment, because Disco Elysium is a spiritual successor of that game in a very true sense, and like that's kind of like the originator for this kind of stuff, and I still really hold that game in high regard. It's a different place, different characters, but the way it's told is very similar.
Yeah, I can definitely get on board with more like this. That's one of the amazing things about my time at RPG sites. Sounds like I'm leaving, but it's like since I started here, I've played so many types of games. I mean, I might have played Disco Elysium anyway because of like word of mouth, but because specifically we can talk about it, I really wanted to go for it. And now, like, same with Hades, I've got like a game for life, a game I really, really care about. And that's just awesome. So yeah, like I'd definitely be up for trying more like this.
It's a hard game to sell for sure, but hopefully, like, I feel like maybe in this discussion we've done that a little bit. I want to go back and replay it. Like,
yeah,
now that we've talked about it here.
But give it a month. That's all I'll say. Give it a month, and it'll be 10 out of 10.
It's okay, Brian. The PC version's in a good enough state. You can replay it now.
No,
I don't want good enough. I want like good. So I can wait for a few months.
Well, I'm also, not to get off topic a bit, but there's enough games releasing now starting in April that I'm kind of like, when will I earmark time for it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that as well. Like the replays that I want to do, I'm looking ahead. I'm like, Nier's coming out. Maybe don't get too deep. So the second game I've played, which I have less of a fond opinion of, but I guess that's inevitable when I think so highly of Disco Elysium, is Oddworld Soulstorm. It's free on PlayStation Plus. If you haven't played an Oddworld game, they're they're not they're 2D puzzle platformers, and they are brutally hard. And
this is free for only PS5 owners, right? Of PlayStation Plus, or is it
yeah,
PS4
only
as well?
PS5.
Okay.
PS4 players can buy it and get a free upgrade. Obviously, that's not quite the same. It's like you can buy it and then get it on other consoles. Not as cool as getting it for free, but it is worth it. I would say like it's definitely worth buying. I'm gonna keep playing it now that I finished Disco Elysium, but it's it is really good, and the platforming stuff is all really, really good. But so far, and from what I've read, I don't think it does justice to some of the themes and the story of like even Abe's Exodus, which is what it's based off. Like there's a lot less. They downplay the themes a lot. So in Abe's Exodus, like they drink this Soulstorm brew, and essentially like they get it for free, and it hooks them, and they're basically stuck in this like endless cycle of working to feed that addiction to the drink. And then it turns out the drink is actually made of like the bones of their own relatives, so they're basically like becoming cannibals for this drink. Like it's a commentary on loads of different social themes. I'm not going to get into it, but like the way it's presented is really, really dark. And then from what I've played of Soulstorm so far, it's not really recognizing that. It's putting it more as like a background theme, and I don't know, it doesn't hit as hard then. I think the dialogue's a little clunky. The game itself is just generally like a little bit clunky, but it is still really awesome.
Is it a different developer or is it the same?
No, same developer. It's just it's had a rough development, like you can tell. Apparently, like you've going through the game's files, you can see like a lot has been changed within a year. And they've always said it's not a remake of Abe's Exodus. It's instead like a sequel to New and Tasty. So it's like it's not supposed to be a remake. It is a really, really different game, but just there are certain elements of it I would have liked to have seen carried over, done differently, but like carried over. I haven't finished it yet though, so right now my thoughts on it are kind of like they're completely underdeveloped because I've obviously all my brain power's gone into Disco Elysium. So next week I imagine I'll be like, oh, Oddworld's the best, or Oddworld's okay, or Oddworld's the worst. Well, we'll see.
The
so
three
you guys
opinions.
The only opinion.
Yeah.
So you guys have been waiting to hear this, but on the Google Doc, we write out what we've been playing, and after Soulstorm, I put that I've made a very bad life decision, which sounds very dramatic. So Josh did the same last week. No. Oh, I already did that. I started to re-download, drumroll please, Marvel's Avengers.
Oh.
I don't know why I did it.
Yes.
Chaos. I don't know what it is. I was just thinking about it. Like you think about an X from years ago. You're like, oh, I wonder how that's doing. And I was like, oh no, I've whipped out my phone. I'm about to download Marvel's Avengers again, and it's just started. I don't know. I feel like
the PS5 version, or what version are you downloading?
Sadly, I have to download both so I can add my save to the cloud. Yeah, don't get me started. It's so ass.
Oh yeah.
What a mess.
Are you excited again?
Kind of weirdly, yeah. Like I saw that they were having. I don't know why this did it, but they're offering a superior Iron Man skin like on the store. I say offering, like you have to pay for it. But I saw that and I was like, yeah, I'll waste 5 hours downloading 2 games. Like, why not? Let's do it. But I've always said when I pushed for us to cover Marvel's Avengers, and then as soon as the review was done, I was like, yeah, I'm not bothered anymore. And then they've released 2 updates to it, and they've changed quite a lot. And overall, like I heard like pretty positive stuff about it. Besides like the player base, like it has probably improved as a game. So I kind of want to do it some justice.
Yeah, they added your 2 favorite superheroes this last time. They added Girl Hawkeye and Boy Hawkeye.
Oh, I love that. Like start with Hawkeye. That's what everyone wants.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to re-download it for Black Panther, and obviously that's not coming until probably next year now. But I want to give it another go. I want to see what's different. So maybe next week again. It's not done yet. My Wi-Fi.
Maybe it'll still be downloading by next week. You don't know yet. Maybe like it's at 50%, guys. It's almost there.
It's like 120 gigabytes, which just feels criminal for Marvel's Avengers.
Especially for limited PS5 space. It's like, well,
maybe it's not worth it. Yeah, I might get like 270% and go, I won't bother. But I thought I'd let you know that it suckered me back in for a second.
Well, good luck. I don't actually know what to say. I'm happy for you, or I'm sorry that happened.
It can be both.
You're an easy man to please. Just dangle an Iron Man skin and you're off to the races.
Sorry, it's the superior Iron Man outfit. Thank you very much.
It does look cool though. It does look very cool.
All right, no, thank you for kickstarting the talk on Disco Elysium, and sorry we had to end it on Marvel. But moving on, let's go over to James, since you already talked a little bit about Disco Elysium, but you also have a few other games on here that we haven't talked about yet.
I'll wait to talk about Outriders once Josh talks about it, because that just makes sense. So I played Ratchet and Clank, the PS4 game, because it got a PS5 patch, and I've been looking
Game.
I've been looking for a reason to play my PS5, and I just got a 4K monitor, so it's like, hey, this is something that might be fun, and it is. Not much to say about it. If you've played a Ratchet and Clank game, you know what to expect.
It looks really good. Like they pulled out the 60 FPS PS5 patch really well. Like I watched a Digital Foundry on it. I have it installed on my PS5 for ready to go whenever, and it looks like a fun time. Like I think that's the real bummer about after the PS2 era Ratchet and Clanks, when they decided to make the move to just develop them at 30 FPS. I'm like, that's not Ratchet and Clank in my head. Like Ratchet and Clank has to be in 60 FPS to really sell me on it. It's one of those like weird games. It's like it just looks so much better in motion, especially for like the Pixar-esque graphics that they're going for. But like it's hard for me to play that game at a frame rate less than 60. So
I do remember several years ago now, it was kind of funny that Insomniac almost like made a declaration like our games will be 30 FPS going forward.
That was a decade ago after Ratchet and Clank: A Crack in Time.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird. It was just a weird thing to declare at the time, you know? It's just okay.
Crack in Time is also the best Ratchet and Clank game. I think that's universally agreed upon. But I will say this, not to piggyback off, not to take over your section, James, but gameplay-wise and looks-wise, I think I've said this before, I'm definitely repeating myself, but it is one of the best Ratchet and Clank games, 2016. But story-wise, it is a pile of shit, and I hate it.
Oh yeah, totally. It's like...
It does not get Ratchet and Clank.
I mean, thank God Rift Apart is based off the old Continuum. Let's just say that. It's like all this, like you can tell playing through this that all of the weird story decisions were because, oh, well, this is how it is in the movie, and this is a movie tie-in game, and it was a budget release. It was like $40 at launch. It's like, it's still a good Ratchet and Clank game. You just gotta ignore the story.
Just hit skip on every cutscene that plays.
I had flushed the Ratchet and Clank movie like out of my brain. Like until just now, I had like completely forgotten that had happened.
Lucky you. I still haven't watched it. Like I heard bad things about it, and I was like, I like Ratchet and Clank too much to put myself.
But yeah, game's good. I will say that the HDR implementation is pretty nice. That's also something I got to check out with my monitor. It's a lot of fun. I'm not sure if I'm going to go for the Platinum Trophy because there's a lot of grinding out like weapon levels. And it's like, I remember like the last Ratchet and Clank game I really went for like 100% on was, I think, Size Matters on the PSP. But that's because it was like during a period of my life where my PS3 was broken for like several months and I didn't have anything really to play besides my PSP. So I was like, I'm going to squeeze every last drop out of this game if it kills me.
Oh, Size Matters as well. Dang.
I think my first PSP model was I don't know if it was a Daxter or Clank game that was like bundled with like a silver PSP.
Daxter's awesome.
It was the PSP Slim Daxter bundle. I remember. That's the one that I got too.
Yeah.
It was like the metallic silver one, and it was Daxter was a good game, but we're talking about Ratchet and Clank. I actually did like Size Matters. It's obviously not as good as the console ones, but I feel like it had pretty good level design. It had a decent enough story. I think it has some of the best Clank segments of any of the games. I'll say that much.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit of an elitist with Ratchet and Clank. Like I heard myself then, like, what a snob, because I was just about to like slag off Secret Agent Clank as well. I was like, oh, that's a pile of crap.
Secret
Agent
Clank is bad.
Secret Agent Clank.
Yeah. Well, it's good for one playthrough, but never again.
Yeah, that's what I'd say about All for One as well.
Yes,
Size Matters. I don't like some games.
Size Matters is a legitimately good Ratchet and Clank game. I will say that it's probably better than 2016. Shocker. But yeah.
Whoa.
I will say I did like the it's been a while since I played the original, so I'm not sure if how much of a difference the hoverboarding segments are in 2016, or if even there was ones in the original. But the hoverboarding races were actually plenty of fun in 2016. I'll say that. Probably was a lot easier in 60 FPS versus 30 FPS. But yeah, I kind of been waiting for Rift Apart, because that's like one of the major reasons I got a PS5 at launch. And they said, oh, it's going to be launch window. And it's like, oh no, it's actually coming out in June.
Yeah, I wonder if it's gonna like. I feel like everyone's just taking bets these days on that game. It's like, is that the next game to be announced to be delayed? It feels like any day now if they're gonna do it.
Yeah, I think so. And
Don't
it's
worry.
weird because like they keep tweeting stuff from just like the only bit of footage they've showed. Like they're tweeting
Yeah,
like those days.
it's weirdly like we don't really know much about that game besides the initial like the debut trailers. That's the
It's
thing.
2 months away. Like I think someone tweeted something out there about signing an NDA, so they can't talk about it. So I presume there's previews coming. But like if you turn around to me tomorrow and said, yeah, it's delayed till October.
We still don't know
I'm not surprised.
the woman protagonist's name, do we?
Nope. Rose
It's
is
going
what
to be
people say.
Rivet.
No,
be Rivet.
Rose.
The last one I heard was Ratchet. That's like the only one I
Ratchet.
I like that.
Ratchet.
Yeah.
Wrench.
I don't know who made that up. But I was like, but if you told me that was the name, I was like, you know what? I believe that.
What even is a launch window anymore? Just a launch year and a half.
Yep.
Which, given what 2020 was, I don't know if we can scowl too fiercely at that.
But hey, even if Ratchet and Clank gets delayed, Returnal has officially gone gold. Woo!
Yeah, it's not that. I look. I'm saying like I would probably like playing that game. I just, as we all said again and again, it's like, is it really launching at $70? Is that still real? I don't know. Yeah. Speaking of games that I don't know, probably should have been delayed, maybe should have been delayed. Who knows? You want to talk a little bit more about Outriders games?
Yeah. For a
Mhm.
game that's as unexceptional as Outriders, it's honestly fascinating that I want to play it so much, and yet it doesn't want me to play it.
Okay, so yeah, we talked a little bit about this last podcast. I finished up the main campaign in it. I primarily did it. Yeah, I only played the main campaign solo because of all the server issues last week. And still is not. There's less server issues and more. We'll get into it. The campaign itself, it's not really a great game when you're talking about everything else but the gameplay. The core gameplay is pretty good. But like, I'm sorry, James, I have to break your heart because James and I have been talking about this. He's like, that spider boss at the volcano part was like really good. I'm like, yeah, like I really dug that. And then no other boss has really reached that high of highs in that game. So every other yeah, like all the other bosses after this kind of like insignificant, relatively speaking. The final boss is actually really annoying because the final phase of that last boss fight is very different from the layout of the game. Like throughout the game, you're in each combat arena is usually littered with like cover places. The last phase of that final boss fight is very much not that, and it has a very specific enemy configuration along with the final boss that like makes it difficult to manage it, like depending on your class and build. So I had to really think about how to push through that. I had to eventually bump down the world tier just one less than I was. I think I was like world tier 12. I beat it. And like it's okay. The way it ends is a very non-ending, I would say. It's a more of a justification of why, you know, you go into post-game grind. So after you beat the main campaign, you open up this new feature in the game, the post-game, called Expeditions. And Expeditions work a lot like Diablo 3's Greater Rift system, where you go into a stage and like these stay at like there's like maybe about a dozen like zones you can warp to, and they're all different, like in similar environments that you encounter the main campaign, but like they're different layouts, like the way they're configured, the arenas that you're actually fighting in, they're configured differently from what you see in the main campaign, and there are some like unique bosses that only emerge from expeditions. But it's very much, hey, you start this and you try to beat it as fast as possible. You go in, here's a combat arena, you beat this combat arena, next combat arena, you beat that, and then the last one, usually 3 or 4 in, there's a boss, and then you beat that as fast as possible, and all the loot that you get from it comes at the end, and you're ranked by how fast you beat it. There's like bronze, silver, and gold, and I don't know exactly what determines what challenge tier you start off as. Like I started off at challenge tier 5, and but you can bump it up or bump it down if it's too much, and then that'll go up to 15 levels up to challenge tier 15, and then that's as you're doing that, you're bumping it up or pushing it up. Obviously, enemy stats get inflated, but the quality of loot that you get is better because their item levels are significantly better. Like say your main character level caps out at 30, but then your item levels can go at the level 40, level 41, all the way up to level 50, and then challenge tiers affect that and whatnot. It's okay, like for it's not a service game like they've been pushing and advertising as much as possible. So getting on that loot grind at the end of the game is like, if that's for you, it's a decent implementation of like what to do after the game to really push to feel powerful and whatnot. And then you can obviously replay the entire game at any point if you want to like take your powerful loot and then go back to like the main story and like max out your world tiers and that, and then and you can like remake or make other characters and like try other classes and then go through all that grind again and whatnot if that's for you. So it's like it's okay, like it's fine. I think the main barrier that James and I always push against this game since last week is the technical issues are still rampant. Like the servers have stabilized, so this is always online game. So even if you're playing single player, it can still boot you off, and then you're unable to play. Those have stabilized significantly, but there's still multiplayer issues across the board. They recently pushed out a patch, that tries to get crossplay up and working. I haven't tried it for myself yet. I want to see later on with some friends if that's all working. The only thing that's making me hesitant is now that a lot of people are reporting that ever since this new patch came out to try and resolve those crossplay issues, a lot of people's inventories and like equipment on their characters are getting wiped, just flat out wiped.
It's like the worst thing that can happen.
Exactly. So it's like
I want to jump in here because I don't know if my brain is just rotted, but like
Sure.
I've heard you say just now and last week this game is not a service game, and I'm trying to like straighten that out in my head because we've compared it to like Diablo 3, which is a service game. It's always online.
Diablo 3 is not exactly
like
a service game in the terms like there's no dailies, there's no like daily login bonus or like hey, there's like a seasonal event type stuff. I guess in Diablo 3's instance, there's like ladder seasons.
Yeah, there are seasons.
I don't know if this will have like seasons,
but like
so if you count
so is the end game going to be expanded on, or is it kind of like it is what it is and it's all there?
I have no idea, and this is the weird part about it is this game is largely, this game is like you can play through single player, you can play with friends. There's no competitive aspect to it. It's always cooperative. There's like no online leaderboards, and the weird part is that people can fly. The developers of this game have recently, over the past week, have issued like balance changes to it because there were certain like builds that like really outshine the other like skill trees for each class, or even like Devastator, the class is like vastly like it's been like as people have been playing more and more this game, it's like Devastator, the class is like being outshined by every other class because every other class have like these abilities or the skill tree that really enhances their ammo, their bullets. They have a way to like basically play it more like a shooter, where they're not really making the most out of like their tools, but like making it so they put their gun in this enhanced mode where they can like refill their ammo infinitely, and like that's the build, and like they really focus on damage and refill their ammo like organically without reloading and whatnot. And instead of like buffing the other trees available for each class, or making like, or even Devastator, like, you know, more powerful to like be on par with them, like the recent balance patch for this, and it's weird because like it's not a service game, but that there's still balance patches in like a non-competitive game that even has like no online leaderboards or whatnot, but like they've made it so that they've nerfed like the Technomancer and the Trickster classes, so they can't. So it makes that build sort of harder for them, and the Pyro class has been largely unaffected by this. But at the same time, those challenge tiers, like the times, the bronze, silver, gold, they've made those times tighter, so it's even harder to get gold on some of the maps there. And like it's kind of like it's a weird thing to like balance things and nerf things in like a non-competitive game, and like really forcing people. It feels like a reaction to a problem that isn't there, essentially, because it feels that when you read the patch notes and you think about like how the game is structured, it reads more like that People Can Fly is more concerned that like, oh, people are getting to the end of the end game too fast. What should we do to like put a band-aid on this real fast? Let's just make everything harder without but putting into consideration that, you know, for example, enemies at that late game really, you're kind, at some respect, you're kind of hindering yourself if you're playing with others because of the multiplayer scaling. Enemies get scaled insanely high when you play with like the max 3 players, and it's like it makes that even much more harder compared to playing by yourself, for example. And instead of making more builds viable for that end game to have cooler like synergies with one another, like they're just kind of like just making it so it's harder for everyone, and no one's really everyone's being frustrated on top of all these tech issues of inventories being wiped. Who knows if crossplay is actually working now or not? So like this game's like, it's such a weird state, because if I were to review this game right now, I have no idea like how to even address its flaws, because these flaws are so temporary or in the moment, but it feels bad, and like, and you don't actually know if it's going to get better or worse depending on how, if People Can Fly either like admits that like, you know, maybe we went too far with this and it'll become a better game, like let's say in a month, or it'll just like continue to get, you know, worse and worse, like from where it is right now. It's so weird. Like, and but at the same time, like you were saying, like being confused about whether this is a service game or not. On paper, they said it's not a service game, so I don't actually know if they're going to add like more content to it as moving forward, or this is it, or this is just the state of the game, and just like having a tug of war with the developers of like making the end game more fun versus more punishing versus more challenging, etc., and all these elements that largely exist in service games being in this game as well. If that makes sense.
It does. It's just that it seems like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, where they're like, it's not a service game because we don't want the stigma of that, but we want to support it sort of like one. Like we want to have the facade of one, but we're going to cut out the bad parts and only leave the good parts, or like something like, is that possible? It's, I don't know if you can just treat it like a jigsaw puzzle quite like that.
Yeah, it's who knows? Like on paper, if everything like worked fine, like just even being able to like play with friends, like when I played the demo of this game, it felt perfectly serviceable and doable. It was fine. Everything was there. Obviously, when they scaled up and when it came to Xbox Game Pass, and who knows how many players are in every other platform for this game, and doing this ambitious, everyone can play with each other through crossplay type of deal from day one. It's a lot of growing pains, and I mentioned this at the last podcast, but I could kind of understand that like they weren't expecting this much like popularity, but at the same time, this game came out at the best time when there's like, it's a relatively dry period for games, so that's why a lot of people have been talking about this. But it also came out at a time where they couldn't support like the potential player base this has now, right? Like I imagine they had expectations like, okay, this is like what we expect the server population to be, this what we expect, how many people are playing this, and then that just, I imagine, just blew them away. And now we're stuck in a weird period where even we're like over a weekend and it's still like, I don't know. Some people can play this, some people can't. Some people are having issues. Some people say they're not having issues, but they really are. It's weird. It's weird, man. Like, I
What is your plan, I guess, then, for Outriders? Like, what are you gonna like? What do you say? What do you see as your finish line?
I want to try out crossplay with friends who are like, they're very much at the end of the end game, but like still want to perfect their builds. I want to try it out and see what happens there, whether we get the inventory white bug or not. That seemingly a lot of people on social media have been talking about, and hoping for the best that it doesn't happen to us. And I do want to write a review for this game because I think it is an interesting game, but I have to really think about like, when should I write this review? Because right now, at this very moment in time, we're expecting
Such in flux.
Yeah, we're expecting like a patch next week, or just upcoming week rather, where it'll supposedly fix a lot of the multiplayer crash issues. I think the patch that came out a few days before this podcast was for rebalancing, like those builds and whatnot, and nerfing a lot across the board. So I'm not exactly sure like what my plan is for this game until I get a better sense of like how stable this game will be, I guess, in a week, which is such a weird thing to say. But
Granted, we were hoping that it would be stable this time this week.
Yeah. And I guess before I forget, I do have to issue an apology to James because we had our wires crossed, miscommunicating last week in terms of like legendaries in this game. Legendaries in this game only have 2 slots, which gives us getting at what I was getting mixed up with is legendaries have 2 slots, but they have access to third tier 3 mods, which are like the really powerful ones, and that's where I think our wires got crossed. So just clarifying an error, like a legit error from last week. We were talking about it. Legendaries do not have 3 mod slots; they have 2 mod slots, but they come equipped with a tier 3 mod on them when you get them.
Yeah.
Any other final words about Outsiders? Is Outriders or Outsiders? I can't remember.
It's Outriders. I do want to say Outsiders too. Yeah, I want to.
Maybe I'll still have enough time to finish up my playthrough by the before the Monster Hunter Rise patch hits, and I can kind of. This is going to sound cross, but so I can kind of forget Outriders exists.
Yeah, dude. I'm just thinking like if this game launched like without all these issues aside, like I'm sure it would have been like a hell of a game to play. But now its first impressions are everything, and this game will probably be remembered as like one of the rougher launches in this period, because I don't know if this game has legs like 2, 3, 6 months from now. I don't know if it'll have that. If this is the current state of the game, like in terms of like end game, and this is all you do till the end of time, and there's no more additional content added to it, which is fine, but then it's just like kind of like a come and go game. It was right for this time period where nothing really else is coming out. But it's I don't know if I'll remember this game in a year either.
All right, I think, is there only did that finish up what James had been playing and Josh, other than the last thing you've been holding back?
I think so, unless James had any final thoughts on Outriders.
Did I confuse you? I'm sorry.
I will say that the story in I feel like the story in Outriders is maybe a little bit better than we were giving it credit for. It doesn't take itself seriously, but it's very clear that a lot of the it's very intentional everything it's doing. Let's just say that.
It's self-aware as it's very much a B movie, so it's not
Yeah,
it's not like
it's enjoyable. It's
A
enjoyable.
letter
yeah,
B movie,
it
not a
does what
BE
it
movie.
does. It does what it needs to do, but it's also clumsy enough to not be enjoyable as well, in the sense that like even like cutscene choreography, as like when you turn like you get there's an inherent shaky cam to it that you can turn off
It
or
reminds
like toggle, but
Yeah.
but there's a lot of like scenes that, like have like weird awkward panning to like action shots that it's like okay, all right, sure.
it kind of feels like they were almost trying to like mimic what Kojima did with Metal Gear Solid 5, but weren't able to manage it nearly as well.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
I will say though that completely random, there was this one side quest that stood out to me where you get it from Trench Town, so it's like we're still fairly early on in the game, and you have to investigate what happens to this one woman that apparently quote unquote was abducted, and then you just find them and turns out no, they're just a bickering married couple now. And there's no enemies to fight, nothing. It's just like you see the cutscene, quest complete.
Yeah,
Not touching it.
Yeah, some of the side quests are pretty amusing. Like they're well, a majority of them are largely like the same in how you progress to them, and like you go to the side quest area, the zone, you fight off these enemies, and you either find something or retrieve something for the person. But there are some surprising ones like that where it's just like, oh, this is it. Okay, cool.
And that leaves us with the game I've been playing alongside Josh, I believe.
Yeah.
So I have put about 10 hours into Fantasian from Mistwalker and Sakaguchi and Umatsu. And I know that you've also put in slightly more than that. I think you're a little bit ahead of me. I don't want to like color your interpretation with mine. So how do you feel about it so far?
I think it's pretty. It's charming. It's very. I was
I'm enjoying
surprised by
it quite a bit.
Yeah,
Like,
I am too.
so a little bit of background here. Well, did we talk about this last week about you getting the Apple TV to play this and the Platinum game, and then you were streaming it and I was watching it, and then I like went ahead and went on my iPhone and got my free month, my trial month of Apple Arcade, and started playing it on Monday, so like a few days after last week's podcast, and I'm enjoying it quite a lot. It feels I don't want to like repeat all the same language that we use for Bravely Default, where it's like, oh, it's nostalgic, oh, it's classic. But I don't want. I'm trying to like my vocabulary is only so pretty limited.
It's very much captures the essence of a PS1 JRPG in a very endearing sense. It's not like, oh, this feels dated. It's more like it feels quaint. It feels something familiar, even though it's something new, and it does just enough to like it makes you feel at home, but at the same time does enough to like kind of switch things up.
It feels a lot like the game that I think of when I play this is Final Fantasy VIII. Like, not in terms of story, but in terms of presentation, in terms of just what the game feels like to play. I think of Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think you're right. You're on the spot.
The art style is a bit different, but it's like the obviously we've talked on previous podcasts about how they created the dioramas for this, which basically serve as the replacement for pre-rendered backgrounds, or they effectively became the pre-rendered backgrounds. So you got like these fixed camera angles. So whenever you're traveling through a dungeon or a city, like the perspective that you have will shift as your character moves throughout, which is kind of similar to like the in my head right now is just Balam Garden as the camera slowly follows Squall as he runs across the front of this giant building, but then we'll change the perspective as he goes to the rear or as he goes into any of the wings.
It also reminds you of Resident Evil, though. The more like as I play more of that too, to me it more closely resembles Resident Evil than Final Fantasy VIII when it comes to camera tilt shift, because the camera is much more up close in Resident Evil, and this game focuses more on like near camera movement, while in Final Fantasy VIII it's more wide open spaces.
Yeah, and the camera in Fantasian doesn't pan as much. it depends a little bit as you go across different screens, but usually instead it'll just change your perspective entirely once you're in a different region of a city block or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I first started this game on Monday, it starts out pretty slow. Like you start out with like one party member through a tutorial dungeon, then you get a second, and the combat's still pretty simple. But it kind of just keeps ramping. Like you get different party members, and they have different abilities and access to different elements, which actually played a much bigger role than I expected it to.
I mentioned where are you specifically right now?
Oh, I just got my warping capability restored.
Okay.
So early on in the game, well, maybe not early on, a few hours in, you get the ability to warp, and you can kind of go anywhere to like revisit dungeons or whatever, but there's not a ton to do. And eventually, through story reasons, you'll lose that ability. And then later in the game, you kind of reclaim it. And it's a bit, by that point, you're stronger. It's a little bit more open. And that's kind of where I just got to.
So you already have, you've already met, not the initial two party members, but the other two party members.
Yes, I've met party members 4 and 5, basically.
Okay, yeah. So it's also weird because like you don't, the way that like you meet party members in this game is actually pretty interesting because like you don't want to spoil like who they are and how you met them because they're all pretty like, oh, that's a party member and this is where I get them. This is how I met them, and it's one of those things that like little moments that you don't want to spoil for others because it has that special like moment around it. It's like, oh, that's cool. This is what they do. This is how we met up.
And
go for it.
My main takeaway, like if I kind of have a few things that I want to touch on this game while we have the chance here. But my main takeaway, like the first thing that's gonna roll out of my mouth is it feels well balanced, which might sound weird talking about a single player, classically designed turn-based RPG. But every single time I get into a boss encounter, I just feel like they knew exactly what the player, because I guess maybe that's by design, because I haven't actually ever been to a point yet where I can swap out my party members. It's always been like at this point in the game, at this point in the story, you have access to, these 3 characters. But every single boss fight I get to, it's like, here's a golem that has 2 arms that you can destroy. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna use a strategy and destroy the arms before I focus the head. And then like the arms do a shit ton of damage as he like pummels you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like having to like make sure my health is topped off to put all the proper buffs and debuffs on, and then I destroy the arm as soon as like the turn or a few turns before it really would have become a problem. Or that there's this other boss that has kind of like this Final Fantasy X chocobo eater strategy where he's trying to like push you off a cliff. And like by the time I realized kind of like what the strategy was there, like what you do to counteract that, he had like pushed me a few times. I had a couple pushes left, and like I felt like the tension was there. It was real. It wasn't a pushover, but I made it through. And there was later bosses where they all have other different strategies. Like there's this other boss where his positioning is, I guess positioning in general is a key component of this game. It's not just front row, back row, like Final Fantasy VI or whatever, but weapon attacks will have they'll either drill through enemies or they'll arc or they'll like lob as an AoE. And so both regular battles and boss encounters will take advantage of that. And like it's just so smartly made where I haven't ever gone into a boss fight and been like, that's it, like walk through it. Like no, there's a decent level of challenge. I've never like wiped, but I'm constantly thinking, adjusting, using the tools given to me. Like, aha, I have access to this character.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of like close moments. It's like, oh man, like what? Like, there's not a wasted turn. It's like if I make the wrong decision on this turn, it could probably be the end of this fight.
Can I play devil's advocate very briefly? Yeah. I've heard from a couple different places. One thing that seems to be maybe people are a little bit less hot on the game may be that, quote, bosses are just too gimmicky. How do you feel about that? Like there's some specific route you have to beat them, and if you don't do it that way, then you can't. I've never played it, so that's why I'm devil's advocate here.
I can see why you would say that, but I just because like for instance, the golem that I talked about, I feel like you would have a really tough time if you decided I don't want to destroy his arms, I just want to take it on his head. Like, is it a gimmick where like that's the design intent, where that you have to DPS down his arms and then his head? Or there's another boss that has a tail instead or whatever, or this other boss that rotates between being close to the party and farther away from the party. Maybe it's slightly gimmicky, but I think it's done in a way where it forces you to change your it forces you to change your strategy. It's not just the boss deals this much damage, I deal this much damage.
Not just do as much damage as you can as fast as you can.
Yeah, so there is a nugget of truth to that, but I don't ever feel like, oh, I'm just handcuffed. I have to do this on this turn and this on this turn. It kind of it's kind of like a route is given to me, but I choose how I want to go down it.
Yeah, it's not like everything is like machine fabricated or predetermined. It's like, oh, like if I run this boss battle through a script, always doing this, then like of course that was the intended outcome and whatnot. I think it's less rigid than that. I feel like it really does give players enough like freedom in a sense to like kind of tackle it the way they want, even though like the answers are in front of you. Like the way you get there is like it's kind of up to you in a sense. I think. So
here's
Go for it.
I have kind of two examples that I think kind of are my counter argument to Adam's devil's advocate argument. There's this one boss who basically every few turns will put up like a bed of spikes, which you have to be able to attack through or around to get to the boss. And then the boss will do an attack depending on how many spikes are still standing. So I guess there's two ways you can tackle that, or at least two that I can think off the top of my head. You can either use Leo, the main character, to do basically line attacks to try to drill through those spikes before this big attack comes. What I tried to do is I had this character who uses like a bunch of bombs and items, try to lay a charge bomb that will detonate as soon as the spikes go up. Like that was my strategy. Someone else might decide to use like an AoE or a spell arc.
Yeah,
instead.
I mainly used grenades for that character. I didn't use the time bomb. I used the grenades.
Right. So like there's a gimmick there, but how you tackle it depends on the player. And then there's another boss that basically alternates between like a damage phase and a like a recuperation phase. So when you're not dealing much damage to the boss, I was focusing on lowering his attack and raising my defense. But you could also like use abilities like concentrate and charge to increase your critical rate or your charge ability. Like so there's a route there, but you can kind of do it different ways. But I just always felt like what Josh said, there's a lot of close calls. Like if I get through a boss fight and I have to use like one or two Phoenix Downs or Phoenix Feathers as they're called in this game, it almost feels like a failure because like, oh, I let someone go down. But it also means like, man, that was close. Like I actually had to think on my toes. It wasn't a cakewalk. I didn't just like use my strongest abilities and win. But it also didn't feel cheap, or it didn't feel like, man, I didn't have a chance there and I just barely eked it out on luck. Like, no, I got through because I had the right idea, a strategy in mind, preparation. So on a design intent, the game feels good to play. That was the first thing I wanted to say.
Yeah. What was your second point?
I guess I wanted to talk about just kind of like story and characters a little bit, but I don't want to do it like with spoiling too much. I guess for people who look at this game and they're like, oh, I just want it to come to PC or consoles or PlayStation. And I kind of know that feeling. I only lucked out because I happen to have an iPhone. And I know certain people who are like going out to buy Apple 4K TVs or whatever. Or certain people. So, and it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I know that's kind of a stigma around this game, is that it's such a limited window, an opportunity of who can play it. Because if you happen to be an Android phone and a Roku box, I don't know. Do people still buy Rokus? I don't know.
Yeah, but still does that.
But like, and you just don't have a choice. Like you literally want to play it, but you have no choice. That's frustrating. So I do hope. I know Apple is credited for this game in some respects, so I don't know what that means in terms of possibility or potential. But it is like it doesn't feel like an upskinned mobile game. It feels like an RPG that released late for the PS1.
This is definitely one of those, like, I'm not going to say system seller, but I definitely felt better about what I did after playing this game. Like,
What I did.
Yeah.
Like you hurt someone.
compared to like Platinum Games' World of Demons, which is definitely has all the trappings of a gacha game, UI wise, progression wise. You can tell that was retrofitted to not be one after the fact, but it's still structured much like one. So I'm less engaged with it. This one feels like a full blown console RPG that harkens to a bygone era, essentially. And what I really, really, really dig about it is that it's one thing to really make the story about your game for the most part when you're marketing it, about how unique the development was. But this game manages to walk that walk too, where you can clearly tell like how this game is very distinguishable. It stands out from the rest because of the way it was developed. Like the diorama environments really make this game shine as you're going to each new area and you're visiting even like a room. It's like, oh, this room is configured differently than the others. Like there's like special touches about this room that makes it like different from the other rooms, and that was all handcrafted, all hand placed there. And that's what really is cool about it, especially when you're out and about and you want to go see, oh, where am I on this map? Well, your map screen is just that diorama they made. It just shows you a little marker of like, hey, here's where your character is in this diorama environment. So you get to actually see like what people made, and in some respects, when you're traveling around this game, it feels like you're playing like an augmented reality RPG because you know that like what you're traveling around is like made from real materials and was made like in the real world, and that's like a really cool element to it. It's not like infallible. There are definitely flaws with it. There are some times where there's like a cutscene that's happening and they zoom in at part of the cutscene and like it zooms into like the diorama and they didn't like resample that image to like look crisp. It still looks like a blurry. It's there's a part of like that diorama screenshot that was blurry, and for that cutscene choreography to zoom in on that part, it's like that kind of sucks. But you know, for the grand scheme of things, it works out fairly well. And then there are also times where that diorama collapses, where sometimes Leo will be running around and he like overlaps part of that screenshot. So like there's like a tip of this fence, and then you move Leo closer to that fence, and his model just like overtakes that fence's like presence, essentially. How it's
Right.
laid on top.
But it's easy to undersell what you told about the diorama like map. Like it seems like such a small thing, but to me it actually kind of like I lingered on it a bit because we're so ingrained to that you have like a map or a mini map, and it basically shows you this is the playable space and this is not the playable space. It feels like very digital. Like it makes you it reminds you that you're in a program, which obviously you are. You're playing a video game. But the fact that they said, like, no, we're not just going to make like a two-tone mini map and the playable space is light blue and the not playable space is dark blue or black. Like, it's just here is an image of the diorama. You can kind of look at the image and see where are the roads, where are the pathways, where are the buildings. And it does ease you a little bit. Like, it'll put a little sword marker over where the weapon shop is, for instance. Like, it doesn't like take away that, but it just like it is so unique and different. And I think that is just kind of commendable that it feels a little bit more diegetic in that way. Like this is what the city block looks like.
And let's not forget also that like there's no voice acting in this game, so the music really stands out. Like Uematsu,
music is great.
This is one of Uematsu's like really really like golden era works from this game. Like the whole soundtrack has been just an absolute delight to listen to, and that's what's so important. And like I think much like how like when Adam and I speak about Nocturne, and like how when we think about Nocturne, a lot of what we think about Nocturne is about the atmosphere and the mood, and how the lack of voice acting really helped elevate that instance, that presence, especially the music in it. That I get the same feeling off of Fantasian, where like the only sound effects you get when it comes to like dialogue is like the little like text scroll when people are talking. So it's kind of like a little chirp tune almost.
But there are a couple different chirps depending on like if someone's like reacting or if it has like a ... because they're thinking or they're looking in a treasure chest. So there's enough there to there's just enough there to sell you. Like you end up just kind of like filling in the blanks with your mind's ear. Is that a statement instead of your mind's eye? like this game is actually really fun to read. It's not quite like Disco Elysium. It's a different thing, but like the way I can't speak to it in terms of localization, because obviously I don't know what the original Japanese reads like, but just reading these characters, like I have a voice in my head for all of them, and they all have a manner of speaking, and not to the obnoxious extent like Charlotte and Charles Lamana or whatever.
I think that's actually one of the most important parts about just broadly localization in general, is to have characters sound like individuals rather than like every single character kind of like speaks the same way, you know? Like that's kind of a failure if every single character just sounds like they talk. Not in a game without voice acting. Like if they just kind of sound like they all talk the same way with the same style of cadences and whatnot.
The first two characters that you get are Tina and Cheryl, and one of them was like raised in the forest, very like improper, sort of, not like improper, but like a common person, and the other one's is a royalty essentially. And the game doesn't go overboard on this, but like the two characters spend a lot of time together, and they do have very distinct manners of speaking. But they don't slap you over the head with it. It's not like the princess says like forsooth thy shall or whatever. But she just like she uses more adverbs, some longer sentences, sort of things. Or the other one's more just like more she uses more exclamations like wow, that's neat, you know, stuff like that, like shorter little exclamations, things like that. And they just speak differently. And because of that, I have a different voice in my head for each of them. And then you meet some other characters who have different backgrounds and upbringings of different ages as well. So I think they did a great job being ignorant to how the Japanese reads, but in English, it's a joy to read. Like one of my favorite interactions was, so the main character has amnesia, like I told you, classic JRPG.
Mhm.
But he has this device called a warp. It's just warp drive, warp something.
It's like warp device. That's it.
Yeah,
he has a device called a warp device.
Yep.
It's and he basically says like he's talking to another character, and he says, "I can warp to any place I can remember." And the response he gets is like, "Well, considering the state of your memory, that's unfortunate." And he just replies, "Shut up!" Like the very next thing out of his mouth is "Shut up!" Like it's just fun to read. Like Leo is a kind of a fun character. He's maybe a little bland, but you kind of grow into him as he gets more of his memories back and things like that. But it's like they bounce off each other well. There are a few.
Before you move on, I just wanted to mention one of my favorite interactions. Like if you remember, like probably in a recent part that you were in, like you're searching these treasure chests that are all booby trapped, and then there are these 3 treasure chests, and then you open it and you open them up, and then you open like the final one that emerges, and then like you go fight like the real boss of that area from the booby traps, and then one of your party members like this was all fabricated by Leo, like as he's like regaining his memories and whatnot. They're like, Leo, what happened to you? Why are you booby trapped? Are you okay? Did someone hurt you? As you're going through all these treasure chests that are all booby trapped. It's so overly cautious, and it's so funny.
There are a few things about the writing that aren't like, I think the characterization is really good. The some of the writing is a bit off. I don't want to say it's bad, but like for instance, one of her character traits, Kina, is that she has a really strong sense of smell, which is kind of like, oh, that's different, but all right. But the game like kind of reminds you of it like once every hour, where it's like, this place smells friendly, or this place smells suspicious, just like other things that you can't normally detect with that sense or whatever. And it's just kind of like, oh, that's a bit different, but I'm okay with it.
Like even Leo and Kina's first meeting, it's like the only reason I held you is because you smell different, or like I like your smell. That's like, all right, all right. So it's, yeah, and I think the thing that really it's still a mixed bag for me. Being a Mistwalker game, they do have some elements from previous titles like Lost Odyssey that are in here. Like there are certain events that you stumble across, or like when you're explaining like a background or something that happened, they present it in the way that the Lost Odyssey's 1,000 Year of Dreams was, where there's like a still image artwork, and there's music flowing, and then there's like scrolling text flying through it, like a very visual novel-esque style, similar to that. And like there are certain like words in those like instances where they're like a different size, a higher size to put emphasis on that word, but sometimes it reads very somewhat clumsy manner, because like Like for instance, like they'll say like there's you into this forest and say like this forest was filled with flowers, and then flowers was like all like bigger than the rest of the text. It doesn't really flow well with like the context of the scene. It's like, okay, there were flowers in this forest. You didn't have to emphasize that there were flowers in this forest.
It's just a weird way to emphasize it, because in 1,000 Years of Dreams,
I don't
I
think any
remember right,
words were different sizes.
Yeah.
they didn't do it with sizes. What they would do instead is, I think if sometimes different words would fade in instead of scroll in, or they'd flip
Yeah.
in, or I know they had some where they fell from the top of the screen into the sentence. Like they did
That's
different
cool.
ways to emphasize certain words, but in Fantasian, they just play with font, which is just
And
weird,
also-
because it just sounds like any word that they want to emphasize with the font as you're reading it just sounds like it's shouted in your head, in my
Yeah.
head.
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of both how they're emphasizing it. Just literally, it sounds almost kind of simple, but literally just by making the emphasized words bigger, your mind just automatically thinks of that as shouting, and even if it's like inappropriate to like what it is. And then I also feel like when I was watching Josh's stream that sometimes it's like not how it's emphasized, but like why was this word even emphasized at all?
Right.
It's like it's not a crucially interesting or important word here. So I don't know. It's a little bit
So,
awkward.
long story short, they're not as good as 1,000 Years of Dreams. I still think they're worthwhile, because sometimes you'll have a scene that is displayed to you through this vignette visual novel style, and then you'll have an in-game cutscene later that like branches off of it or calls back to it or is just otherwise tied to it, which ends up making that stronger. So I do think they're worthwhile and useful. There's especially a scene later between Kina and Cheryl that I actually thought was done really well, even though it had the possibility of being like really hackneyed and bad. Maybe I'll talk about it later when we can talk about the story more openly.
I feel like we need to do a spoiler cast or something for this game, because I think both of us really want to talk about it at length, but it's hard to talk about it like people need to play for themselves. It's so
but I hope we're giving the impression that this isn't like some, at least as of the first 10 hours, which I know it's only like it's like we're only the part 1's available, and I haven't reached the end of part 1 yet.
Yeah, I mean,
but it doesn't really feel like it's pared back or like diluted. Like I'm sitting here trying to avoid story considerations because it has one, and it has great characters, and it reads well, and it has fun battle interactions.
Yeah, I guess we should also just like briefly mention like there's a cool battle mechanic called the Dimension battle in this game, where it's kind of designed with mobile in mind, but it also really works well if you're just playing it as a like if you're playing it like down on a TV, where you're kind of storing random encounters. Early in the game, you'll get this device that lets you you flip it on, and then any enemies that you've encountered before, it's not your first encounter with them. If that random battle trigger was to have enemies that you've already fought before, they can be stored into this device, and it'll hold initially up to 30 monsters at a time. And then, but you can activate it at any time as long as there are monsters in there. So even below 30, it's like a good way to like grind in one go. Like say, I don't want to do like 10 to 15 different random battles separately. I just want to combine it all into one. So that's what this device lets you do. That you flip it on and you're transported to like an alternate dimension briefly, like this plain battle arena. But it kind of it adds a certain element of puzzle into the battle system, where it's so littered with enemies, and more enemies phase in as you beat more enemies into it. Like there will be certain enemy configurations where like, hey, I have this magic spell that I can curve and it'll hit like these 5 enemies at once with it. And unlike if you were to encounter them normally, you would only be able to maybe hit like 2 or 3 in that random battle itself. At least in Dimension, it lets you like not only do a lot of grinding in one go efficiently, but it introduces like battle modifiers. So like along the way, throughout the battle, there'll be these little gems scattered across enemies as well. That like if you hit this gem, you'll get an attack up for your party, or if you hit this gem, you can steal an enemy's turn and act again and whatnot. So it's just little stuff like that like really makes that simple little like concept worth it. It's like, oh, that's cool. That's a fun way to do this. I don't have to like go across this map and like have to encounter all these random encounters again and again and again. I can just like store that off or like hold that off until I'm done with this section, then do all the random encounters in one go when I'm
The
ready.
variation in the enemy positioning, in the attack arcs or lines or areas, and the addition of those dimension factors like the skip turn orb or the attack up orbs, they really do help make this turn-based battle system, which is otherwise what you'd expect. It helps it feel fresh. Like it's a turn-based system I think George would enjoy. I'll put it that
Really?
way.
Wow, bold claim.
Maybe. Yeah, that is bold. I guess if I wanted to bring up any other thing that's maybe not as great, the enemy variety is not stellar. A lot of times, what the game will do is it'll introduce like an elemental enemy, like this is a lightning weasel or whatever, and then later you'll beat the fire one and the ice one or whatever, and then like it does that a lot where there's like just different flavors of not all the time. Like there's also like so like you'll meet a goblin and then the goblin mage and then a goblin that holds a shield that likes to stand in front and block your attack. So it's a little bit like samey in terms of enemy variety. I do feel like it fits the gameplay purpose though, because one nice thing is that at least early on in the game, not every character will have access to every element. Like Leo will have a fire slash, one of your mages will have an ice spell, another mage will have a holy spell. So when you go into a battle and you have like these different elements peppered throughout the battlefield, you not only do you have the positioning, like I can have this character swing her holy in an arc and hit these 5 enemies, but these 2 over here are weak to holy, so maybe I should have her attack those instead. So I feel like did I just do a disservice? Like I wanted to bring up like something that the game doesn't do as well, but then I talk about how it does kind of fit the game mechanically. But it does kind of do a lot of this like flavored enemy types where it's just like it's the same enemy but a different color wearing a different hat and it's got a different elemental weakness. It works. I guess if you have limited resources and you can only model so many enemies, that's a smart way to do it. Rather than just saying like this is the tier 2 goblin or the tier 3 goblin, it's they change the element on you and it's okay. Like I haven't really been dour to be like, oh, these guys again or whatever.
Yeah,
Like
it's just enough, you know. It's like it's not one of those. Is like oh man, it's like okay, those kinds of enemies show up now. They're similar to recent ones, but like not like it hasn't really bothered me all that much. I think on it. I think one word of caution to people who like the type of RPG players that like to collect everything in one go when they like go into a new area. Like this game might drive you insane in that aspect because there'll be like there's a lot of special treasure chests in this where there'll be treasure chests you can open up. Ones can be only opened up with this kind of key, and the others can only be opened up with this other kind of key, and you haven't seen that key at all yet. So there's a lot of like I can't get all treasure chests in one go when I scour this area. It's like it's just one of those things I have to remember that it's here, and when I get those kinds of keys, I'll have to come back.
I'll put it this way. I was keeping like a mental list in my head, like, all right, this place has this key. And eventually I just had to stop because there was too many.
Yep.
Like I'll have to revisit all the areas. And not only just like, oh, I can't open this chest with this key. There's been like 3, 4, or 5 times where there's like a chest in a location where I'm like, I don't know how I get up there. Maybe that's a part 2 thing. Maybe that's a certain party member that I get later thing. I don't know.
Exactly. It'll drive you bad. Like there's like a chest like early on, like when you're in this town, there's like this a treasure chest on like the roof of this building, and then you go up on this hill, and then what looks like the perspective looks like, oh, I should be able to just jump to that roof of this hill and get that treasure chest. It's like, nah. I'm like, how do you get up there? It's like, I don't know. It's like, all right, well, great. Awesome.
Well, there's one in there's a bigger city that you get to like 4 or 5 hours in, and there's this giant arch in it that you walk under that has like a bridge shutting out from it. On top of that, there's a treasure chest which you can only see from like one of the perspectives. I'm like, how in the world do I like catapult onto that? I don't know. Do I get a party member that can like climb shit later? Like, what? Does this place get underwater and then I can just swim to it? I don't know. But yeah, so it does kind of. I actually kind of like that to an extent where I'm not just like, oh, I've cleared the cliffside dungeon and I've gotten everything there. No reason to ever go back. Like I know there's going to be a reason to come back at least at some point, even if it's just an errand to pick up a chest I couldn't open before. At least I know like that it will loop back on itself at some point. It's not just like, yep, that area is done, cross it off the list. So I do enjoy that to some extent, even though in the moment it can be frustrating.
Yeah, I don't know if this has frustrated you, but there are certain moments because there are side quests in this game that most of them are easily visible from the map. Like if the quest NPC is like out and about in town, when you pull up like the map screen in your main menu, it'll show that quest. But if that quest NPC happens to be like in a residence or in a household, you don't see their quest marker until you actually like visit that household that they're in and talk to that person. So you won't know where they are if they aren't out in that open town or they're not in a map screen where they can be seen. You have to actually enter that household, and that's where you find them. So there's like this one side quest that I was missing at the second town. Like when you're warping between places, it'll actually show you like it'll show you like if there's an undiscovered quest in that town. And then like for this town, I was like, I'm missing this one undiscovered quest, but I don't know where this quest NPC is because they're not standing around in town. They're like in one of the many households in this
So you
town.
just kind of have to go room by room.
Yep. Like, okay, where are you? Where are you? So that's just one little quality of life thing that I wish. I don't know how Apple Arcade does with like game patches or game updates. I have no idea how that system works, but I would like to see that quality of life update implemented.
It's weird because they're like halfway there because they tell you, oh, in this city you're missing one quest. You're like, oh, perfect. Thanks for telling me that because otherwise I wouldn't have checked. But now where the heck is it? Like they get halfway there.
Yeah.
The side quests so far are kind of very basic. They're not what I would highlight. It's usually go to a different place and deliver something or talk to another NPC and sometimes do a battle. But even then, doing a battle is kind of rare on those, I believe. So maybe they'll get better. They're fine. They give you some cool weapons and other stuff. And I do kind of enjoy just sitting like. Not many games have me do this, but when I'll enter a new place, I'll talk to most of the NPCs that I can because they do world building there. It's not quite on the Kaseki level where every time you revisit a place, they have different stuff to say. Sometimes they'll say the exact same stuff they said when you were first visited 6 hours ago, which is like maybe you've been spoiled by other games that are a little bit more diligent than that. But it's kind of fun just to read just different perspectives of what would a townsperson from here think about this event that happened far away from them or whatever. So.
They'll tell you, you are welcome to go into my house and steal any or take anything you want.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. You go into some houses and like in a classic RPG style, you can like pick up stuff, and sometimes they'll play with that and be like, "You feel free to help yourselves" or whatever. And sometimes they'll like doctor it up, like I'm so loaded, like I'm just like a fat cat. Like you take whatever you want, I won't hurt my bottom line or whatever. Like, thanks, I guess. So yeah, I've enjoyed it a lot. This might sound a little bit corny and hokey, but I spent like the last couple of weeks like not really playing any new games, like just kind of in. I think we all have a couple funks like that where you're not always onto something new. But then this game kind of got me out of it. Like I downloaded it on a whim after watching Josh stream it, and I've kind of really clicked with it. So hopefully some solution is figured out for making it more accessible in other ways.
Yeah,
I have no idea what that would look like, but
I feel like this will be the most overlooked or overshadowed game of the year, to be honest, because of the limited availability. And it's a real shame because it's actually something pretty cool. I'm really interested to see how, one, this game ends off, and two, how long we have to wait for the next part, because that's the thing that in the back of my mind sort of makes me hesitant of like going through this game too fast, because like it's like I know this game won't be done yet, but I don't know exactly where it'll end off as well, and what the implications of that will be. Like, what does part 2 look like? How is that going to be distributed? Is it going to be just like an add-on for this game, or is it a separate client? And will I be able to move my characters over to that? I don't know. I have no idea. But
it's so weird because wasn't that announced like so late? It was kind of like all the release marketing, and then like a month before they're like, by the way, it's gonna be 2 parts. Is that how it went? That's kind of how it feels like it went. Like it was like kind of really late in the game where they mentioned that.
I'm not sure. Do you remember, Adam, on that? I think you're right, but
it felt like it was really late. And yeah, I don't want to say anything too declarative, like, yes, this game is good, you should buy it now if you can, because we're partway through part 1.
Yeah.
I can tell you that the trajectory is good. I'm really liking where it's leading. It's possible that it'll do something really dumb and crash and burn. Like, I don't want to assume that. I don't think it will, but
But
I just don't want to say anything too definitive.
Yeah, maybe we should definitely like if you'd be down for it, or maybe like if another third person comes in as well and tries this out, like we should probably like do a spoiler cast before part 2 comes out or something for this game, because I think it's worth it. It's the next big Sakaguchi thing. I think they really did that. I really like it so far.
I remember when this was first announced, I actually like in the back of my head, like I can't believe Mistwalker is still stuck like doing this sort of stuff. Like I just want Lost Odyssey 2, man, or whatever. but now I'm just kind of like, you know what? I feel it. Like I feel the same DNA behind it. Like I don't know why I was so like looking down on it earlier. I know why I was. I'm realizing that maybe I shouldn't have.
Yeah, I think I was with you too. Like, I think this was first unveiled or announced when Apple Arcade was revealed initially, like maybe 2 years back, I want to say. And then they're like, "Yeah, Miss Walker is doing a new thing," and then it's like, and Sakaguchi's like working on his next big thing. I'm like, man, really?
Potentially the last game for Uematsu.
Or yeah,
So-
for like a full composing, like from beginning to end. Yeah, I don't know, but we'll see. I'm interested to see. I'm invested enough right now to where I'm like, I'm surprised where it's how it turned out, and I'm invested enough to be like, I want to see this whole thing through thick and thin.
And with that, I think we've wrapped up everything that we've been playing, because I believe Adam is playing something that he can't talk about until next week.
I think
Maybe.
that's right. I think that's
That is correct.
All right. I had to throw that in there. I had to, tease them a bit. Okay. So we'll go on to a few article shoutouts that went up in the last week. And one is a late review and one is a review of a game that came out of early access. So Adam took the opportunity to review, and I don't think anyone will guess this if they didn't look at the site beforehand, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So
hell yeah.
A little bit of background here. So we started reviewing the Assassin's Creed games on our site, starting with Origin, when Ubisoft started like clearly marketing them as RPGs. Whether you believe they are or not, I guess it's kind of beside the point, maybe. But so we've kind of like had them under our purview since Origins. But Valhalla, just because of scheduling and availability, we didn't get a review up late last year. But Adam took it basically under his role he decided just to do it on a whim, even though it was a little bit late. So Adam, I guess, do you have any highlights about what you wrote up for Assassin's Creed Valhalla?
Well, I've already talked about it in previous podcasts, so I won't go into it again. But kind of the overall feeling was when I started writing the review, everyone has different review writing styles, but like kind of thinking about each component of the game, I was like, you know what? I wasn't really a big fan of the combat because there's just so much of it and blah, blah, blah. And it's just kind of dull. Boss fights are okay, though. I wasn't really a big fan of the story. It's sort of like this segmented, literally the majority of the game is just creating political alliances. And it's just like this repetitive self-borrowing kind of stories that happen over and over. I don't really like the collectible aspect of this game either. It's just kind of like a checklist, just kind of clearing the map just because it's a thing to do. And then the more I wrote the review, I was just like, man, what did I like about this game? And like, it looked really, really nice. It's got a great visual style, especially on a pretty good PC with HDR and all that. And some of the like main cutscene like cinematography stuff is genuinely pretty good. Some of the side quest stuff, not so much. But otherwise, like once I started writing, it was hard for me to really nail down like what do I like most about this game. And so it kind of ended up a bit more negative than I expected it to be. I scored it a 6 out of 10. It's just, and maybe that's just because
like you went into it not really expecting that, but as you kind of collected your thoughts, it's kind of where you arrived.
Yeah, and I kind of took my time with the game. I kind of took my time with the review, since obviously I wasn't in any rush to post it. It was already going to be late. But yeah, just like kind of thinking back on it, it's a very pretty game. Part of it is perhaps just my perspective that I'm not a big Assassin's Creed fan. I haven't played one since Revelation. So it's not like this is the type of game I am drawn to normally anyway. So my perspective, my review, that's worth the context there, is that it comes from somebody who is a lapsed fan who doesn't normally play these sorts of games. But maybe that's valuable to certain people to be like, is this a game I would like? And to me, someone who isn't already like into this series or into this genre, really, this, open world action RPG, whatever you want, Ubisoft game, it didn't really click with me that much. I'm not going to say it's a bad game. It's just kind of like, I don't know if it's
Like
going to
this,
really
this,
stick
this
with me.
is this is why you had skipped other games leading up to this point, potentially anyway, and you were trying to see if this was a jumping on point for you, and
Yeah.
it turns out it wasn't.
Right, and I hope that's just a valuable perspective rather than someone who, obviously some of the reviews that came out around launch are like, how does it compare to Odyssey and how does it compare to Origins? And maybe it makes big strides in direct comparison in terms of like specific improvements here and there. I don't know, but obviously my perspective is going to be different from that. So yeah, just
I
I'm with
I
you.
think
I was in the same boat. I haven't played Assassin's Creed since like 2 or something, or Brotherhood. Going into Valhalla, and I was like, I don't know, maybe let's see what Assassin's Creed looks like these days. So I was in the same boat as you as well.
And maybe if you're like the type of person where you just kind of want a game where it's just like a big world to explore that looks great and lots of stuff to do, Assassin's Creed certainly has that. I just kind of wish there was a bit more to it than that.
There's a lot of game for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot. I'll leave it at that.
the other review that went up is one that James did. We also did a video review for this, and that is Record of Lodoss War-Deedlit and Wonder Labyrinth, which we did a YouTube video on it earlier where we looked at the early access, but it did come out of early access and James wrote up a review for it. And I guess I'll just lead you to it from that. So take it away from there.
Well, yeah. So I played it. It's all right. It's a decent game. I will say that, in my opinion, it's the weakest Team Ladybug game I've played. I feel like Synchronicity Prologue was better. Toho Luna Nights was definitely better. It's still worth playing, but like I say in my review, I wouldn't really go out of my way to play it if I were you, unlike with some of their other games.
Yeah. Do we know what Team Ladybug is doing next? Do they have any other announced projects besides this or beyond this?
No clue. It'll probably be a licensed game, though, much like this one and much like Synchronicity Prologue. I think the only non-licensed game was Toho because Toho is weird like that. So,
Yeah, that's a whole other mess or can of worms. How they do that stuff.
so yeah.
I do want to give an extra shout out to the video review that James did. James has been honestly knocking it out of the park. He did one for Monster Hunter Rise, which if you haven't watched, you should. And then also for this back to back. So they're up on our YouTube channel at YouTube RPG Site Net. So do go ahead and give it a watch. If you don't want to watch it, we also do have the
Even if you don't want to
written
watch
review
it,
on
give
the
it a view though, just for the metrics.
Leave a comment.
Don't forget
Subscribe.
to click the bell.
And with those features called out, we'll go into the news of the week. So it was still a bit of a quiet period, but we do have a couple highlights. One that just came in a few days ago or yesterday. I don't remember when this was. Square Enix announcement of a release date. So Neo, The World Ends With You will launch on July 27th for PlayStation 4 and Switch. And then in a surprise addendum, it will also release on PC sometime this summer for the Epic Game Store. So how do we feel about this? I'm not a TWUI fan. I haven't played it, so maybe I like a little bit like some of the excitement for this is kind of like passed me by. But
I'm excited.
I'm going to pronounce it how the acronym looks. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
TWUI. It looks amazing. What an amazing trailer! Like that whole sequence at the end. As soon as they mentioned Neku, I was just like, these characters are really well voice acted. Like I already really
we got our first we got our first glimpse at the English cast as long as with their voice actors. I assume we got the Japanese cast too, but I haven't actually looked at that.
Yeah,
We did? Okay.
I don't. Okay, Adam, are you with me in saying that like I don't know how I feel about them revealing or announcing Neku like now for the game? It's
Well,
weird. to me.
I know what you mean.
It's weird.
Like
to me.
I do agree. Yeah, he's Roxas. Also, I had this thought. Sorry to interrupt as well, but I had this thought. He's blonde hair, and the assumption would be that he's dyed his hair to like hide himself. But my mind instead, as someone who has dyed the hair a lot, has gone to I think Neku used to dye his hair orange because like it looks like his roots have faded in the concept art. So like. This is a really
it's just an art. It's just an art thing and not an actual like character thing. It's just the art.
I
It's a
hope
Nomura game,
the first
though,
thing he
really?
says, he comes out the dark. He's like, "I was dyeing my hair orange the whole time," and that's his only dialogue. That's what I want.
Yeah, we got to see a lot more of the game with the trailer. We saw a few gameplay menus. Saw more of the gameplay in action. It's very how they describe it is basically you have 4 pins in battle. 1 pin is assigned to each person in the group of your 4-person party in battle. And to me, that reads like, it's like Valkyrie Profile, but like in a 3D arena space.
You know what it reminds me of?
So
V from Devil May Cry 5.
What's up? Okay, yeah. Okay.
You're speaking my language.
So I mean, it having a more relatively simplistic battle system on its face. We obviously none of us have played this yet. Maybe it's super complex or whatever. But after what they tried to do with the weird compromise and final remix on Switch, I'm kind of down for just something that's more down to earth and simplistic, not gimmicky. Like to me, like with all the other releases of The World Ends With You, the original DS control scheme was always ideal for me. Like that's still the one that I like. That's still the ideal version of the game for me. And all the other releases after that solo remix and final remix like never really hit that same feeling that the first one did. And that it was so tuned for the DS at the time, and it was so unique. I was like, oh, okay, that's weird, but I liked it.
Sorry, Josh, go.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like for me, if I were to like give Final Remix like another go, like putting on co-op mode but playing it solo is like the compromise, I guess I'd have to go for if I wasn't playing it on DS.
Yeah, to follow your point of like a compromised gameplay thing, what I like about this is that even though it does look more simplistic, like I have to think that they have made this combat system for these systems, so when you go in and play it, you're playing the version they want you to play, rather than, in my experience, where I played Final Remix, I'm playing a version that most people would say is not how you should play it. Does that make sense? Like, going in there, this is how they've designed it this time. So, like, even if it's more simplistic, that's how it's supposed to be. So I'm hoping there's more depth to it, but, like, at least I'm going in there on, like, the right foot this time.
There isn't some other version of the game that that for Final Remix, you've always got that in the back of your mind where it's like this is pared back from something that was designed differently.
The one monkey's paw with Neo is that we got a confirmed PC release, but it's not day and date, which means that I'm not going to play it on PC.
Yep. Yeah, I'll just play it on PS5. It's okay. I really don't want to know. I don't want it to be spoiled for me either. I'm excited for it. I really am. And the just hearing that Takeharu Ishimoto is back for this project, and the music in that trailer is already fire. I'm like, let's go. I'm ready for more.
Josh, did you listen to the music tracks from the website?
I didn't listen to that.
There's 3 tracks on the website, and people have found the direct links to the actual MP3s.
Oh, nice! I need to go check that up on YouTube later.
Yeah, send me them because I would love to hear that.
It is interesting though that the PC release is listed as summer, but the other release is already July 27th. I guess it kind of falls into that weird where it's like,
technically most of September is summer, right? So
I just saw a
September
comment on some of the news where it's like, so August, I guess, but it's
Yeah.
like, well, who knows? Like summer. That's all they told us.
Yeah. You mentioned this when it was revealed, Adam, like several minutes after, about the director of this game of Neo: The World Ends With You.
It actually confused me for a bit, but the director is Hiroyuki Ito, who is also the co-director of Final Remix, but it's not the same Hiroyuki Ito that did Final Fantasy 6 and 9 and so on. It's just literally just two people with the same name at Square Enix.
Oh, okay.
That's not allowed.
I think it's one of those things that actually like that was kind of a revelation to me back when Final Remix released, but I kind of forgot about it. Like, yeah, it's just kind of what's the chances, huh?
Yeah, but
So I'm actually curious, like who is developing this game. We chat sometimes about like how a lot of Square Enix games aren't actually developed by Square Enix. Like, Saga Scarlet Grace was not, Trials of Mana was not, Nier is not. So many games are like outsourced. I'm kind of curious, like, is this an internal project or not? I don't know. I'm just curious. Not like it functionally matters as long as they do a good job.
I get you. I was thinking the same. Like, my
Mhm.
head always jumps to like, I don't know why. Maybe it's a segue, but I always think like maybe the Osaka team have a hand in it, like close to Kingdom Hearts. But maybe that's just because
that's still internal develop though. Like it's not like a separate company.
Oh yeah.
Square Enix also does this
I
weird
get
thing. Square Enix also does this thing where they will like create separate companies that are kind of like technically owned by Square Enix, but they sort of separate them. Like they did this with Balan Wonderworld. Yeah, Balan Wonderworld is Balan Studios.
Luminous Productions, is that what that?
Yeah, Luminous Productions is another one. I think they do that literally so like they can shut it down more easily if they need to. But that's actually not what I'm getting at. But like, the Bravely games isn't a Square Enix. I mean, it's a Square Enix published game in Japan, but it's developed by Claytek Works. Saga Scarlet Grace is developed by Studio Feel. Trials of Mana was developed by Zine, I think is how you pronounce it. The Nier Remaster is developed by Toy Logic. Saga Frontier Remaster is developed by Bullets. And none of those are like Square Enix owned companies. It's just they do that a lot. So I'm just curious, who is actually developing Neo?
Well, I think it's
The World Ends With You.
It's
just a curiosity.
Yeah, it's just a curiosity, but it's also just kind of nice, I think, so you can kind of credit them. And so like the next time Claytek Works shows up on a project, you can be like, oh, it's the Bravely Default 2 guys, rather than just like nebulously assign everything to Square Enix.
I just reminds me
or like a director.
How they like officialized like the like even a logo for Creative Business Unit 1 now.
Mm-hmm.
Whatnot. So it's it's interesting. I think the one last thing with Neo that I guess I want to put attention to, it's not even about Neo, but the way they pitched this game is that it starts off 3 years after the new anime adaptation for The World Ends With You, the original game. And and I think that barely started like yesterday as of the time of this recording and whatnot. And it's kind of interesting to see that like they're specifying that it takes place after the anime. So the anime is the new canon right now. Who knows if it'll deviate from Final Remix in any way, shape, or form. At the moment, like from the first episode, it's an interesting observation already that they kind of altered or changed up Neku's characterization just a little bit. While in the game, when that first started, he comes off as a bit more of an open asshole, like the way his manner of speaking. In the anime, he's kind of more soft-spoken, more to himself, more confused, more so than being outward asshole-ish. So
I saw people saying that wasn't like an anime difference, but more an English-Japanese difference, that the English localization of Neku in The World Ends With You, the video game, actually made that change.
Interesting.
And that he was a little bit more of a loner in Japanese, where he's more of a kind of a brat in English. And of course, immediately people are like, how dare they change that? But I think it still works really well.
I think the end result is still the same. I just one of those things like, we're
his
like
character growth is great.
Western players, so they were only really exposed to the English script. So we kind of our depiction of Neku from like the first moments or the opening of that game, I assume is like different from what Japanese players got. So it's interesting.
I personally think that I think I'm really underthinking it. But I think the reason it's set free is just like a technology update sort of thing. Like, I feel like the reason they're doing that, not only because it's the most recent The World Ends With You media, but because for it to make sense for these characters to be like so modern and stylish and have like smartphones, it can't be, and for Neku to be in this, it has to be set like you know what I mean. Like I've fumbled that like a
They changed
doofus,
the canon from like this is Shibuya in 2008.
Yes,
this
exactly.
Is Shibuya in 2020 or whatever.
Yeah,
yeah.
So we'll
I
see.
did see. I don't have any context, but I did see someone say, I don't know how gatekeeping they're being, but they're like, don't watch the anime if you haven't played the game. So they're like, oh, so if I want to play Neo, I have to play the first game, then watch the anime, then play the second game.
I don't know yet about that. It's only one episode.
I'm all for it
so
because it means one thing. If the sequel is basing itself off of the anime, that means that you can just tell people, oh, you don't need to play Final Remix, just play the DS version and then watch the anime.
Well, that's what Brian was saying. He's like, if I want to play Neo, that means I have to play another game and watch an anime.
Right now, that comes off gatekeeping to me. Like it's just only one episode of the anime has aired, and people are like, "Oh, it's over. You're fucked." Like it's like you need to calm down.
Like, yeah, can you glean the basics, or is the information that is not carried into the anime even going to be necessary for the sequel? We can't even say.
It kind of reminds me of Persona 5 Strikers, where they literally just kind of have the anime as sort of like an alternative. Like you can play the original game or watch the anime. Either one of those will basically get you ready for this.
Yeah, and the anime, like for Persona 5, like the animation stuff aside, it's like it's okay. Like you're not like if you don't want to sit down for like 100+ hours of the game, like watching the anime is like it's perfectly viable. Like you're not totally screwed over,
And by the way, if anyone's confused, because I got confused for a little bit, Neo, Neo, is like, it's called Neo, The World Ends With You. So I guess we've adopted that as the tagline. I keep hearing Neo.
Yeah, I keep hearing Neo. I was like,
but
Neo 2 came out a few months ago, and it's really great.
Yeah, Neo 2 is great. You should play it.
That's the name of the game. NIOH: The World Ends With You. That's the name of the game.
Also on the Square Enix front, we got a launch gameplay trailer for the soon releasing SaGa Frontier Remastered. Now, normally with a launch trailer, I kind of like immediately ignore it because it's just like a final marketing huzzah. Like usually it's a couple minutes just like tying up like all the cinematics together and usually spoiling too much.
Yeah,
but,
Square Enix especially.
But the tack that they've taken here for SaGa Frontier Remastered is that it's like an 8-minute, almost like SaGa introduction, like 101. Not really, but it kind of is more of a primer for the game, just because the format and the structure, from what I've understood from covering it, is just not typical. It's just a bit different from the norm what you'd expect. Like some of your presumptions that you might have otherwise are kind of upended in this series. I've played Scarlet Grace, so I have a little bit of firsthand experience with that. But yeah, so the SaGa Frontier Remastered launch gameplay trailer is kind of like, I don't know, it seems like one of those things where it's like maybe you really, really should like watch that before heading into this game if you're not revisiting it yourself, obviously. But this is coming out next Friday, I think. So obviously next Thursday. So maybe by this time next week, we'll actually be talking about our first impressions with the game, and we probably will have a review up.
You gotta get Fantasia done before SaGa Frontier, man. That's it. That's the deadline.
I mean, April is just going. How are we already like 10 days into April, and I like Nier is on the horizon. There's SaGa and other stuff.
Pokemon Snap.
Tier done before, and then Pokemon
Monster Hunter.
James and Josh have already put like hundreds of hours in Monster Hunter.
Oh yeah, do you really think I'm not going to put
yet,
hundreds
as soon as
more?
Yeah, I'll come back for Chameleos and whatever, and Apex Rathalos and whoever else. Sure. Fire up the Switch at 3 a.m. in the morning. There we go.
But yeah, if you're a fan of like Japanese RPGs, not like the big hitters, but just like smaller, more niche releases, there's a ton like in this spring-summer window. Like I haven't even gotten to Bravely Default yet. There's Persona Strikers. There's Nier coming out. There's the SaGa remaster. There's Neo Ends With You is July, I guess. There's
In a month or so, we'll be staring Mana.
there's Nocturne. There's Mana. I mean, some of those are remasters and re-releases. I mean, actually, like 4 of them are, but still, that's a lot.
A lot of people haven't played Legend of Mana and Saga Frontier, so they're new games.
Yeah,
People will lie to you and say, "Oh yeah, I played them before," but they haven't.
I played Legend of Mana. It's
You're
fun.
lying. You're lying.
I'm very honest when I haven't played something because apparently that's most things. I want to get to either. My goal is to get to either Saga Frontier Remastered or Legend of Mana. I'm using like the mathematical or that could mean and. So hopefully both, but at least one.
Mm-hmm.
I guess were there any other comments on this launch trailer, Adam, that like you think are worth calling out, or is it kind of more you should watch it?
So
Yeah.
that's one thing I'm curious about is that like it's one of those things where I played the original 3 Saga games, and then I have played 2.5 of the Romancing Saga games, and they kind of each like trilogy has their own style, and you can see where like the common DNA is for Saga Scarlet Grace, which is an absolutely fantastic game of the year 2019 for us, 10 out of 10 review. But, like Saga Frontier just seems to be a little different in terms of how it's formatted and for somehow some of the characters work. It seems to bring back like the robots and the monster characters from the original Saga games, which work really bizarrely, but it's sort of interesting and weird. Romancing Saga didn't really have any of that, neither did Scarlet Grace. So I'm kind of just like the Saga Frontier games, both the remaster and the second one, just like I'm curious how they are different from all the other Saga games. So obviously they're still Saga games, but there's got to be some unique, like what makes a Frontier game a Frontier game? That's what I'm interested in.
What makes an Unlimited Saga game an Unlimited Saga game?
There's that too. I've heard so much about Unlimited Saga that I feel like I have to play it just to see what it's all about. A lot of it not so good, but there are some people that like you just don't understand.
We're so close, right? They just have to do Saga Frontier 2, and then we're at Unlimited Saga. Are they gonna do it? Are they gonna try to bring it back? I want them to.
Somewhat interestingly, the current producer for the Saga series, which is Ichikawa, I believe, he actually put out a tweet recently in English. He's obviously, a Japanese person, but he put out a tweet in English and Japanese basically saying, "Hey, what do you guys want to see for the Saga series? And what do you not want to see? What do you not want to see?" And obviously the series is relatively niche compared to other Square Enix properties, but that's interesting to me in terms of that the indications seem to be that they are continuing with it. Saga Scarlet Grace is the most recent game, and I'm curious to see. Obviously, there's a remaster coming out, like what they're going to be doing going forward with it. Whether they're going to be remastering other games or they're going to do another brand new title.
Yeah,
So
I wonder. Yeah, it's. I'm very curious to know what their metrics are now. Like, how much has the Saga audience expanded ever since Scarlet Grace? It feels like that was certainly the kickoff. And while it's not like a Yakuza series scenario, it's still relatively niche compared to that. But it has to be somewhat bigger now, right? Like it has to be.
I feel like a lot of it is also the, especially for like the Japanese audience, that mobile game is somehow surprisingly huge. So there's probably quite a few people who have played the mobile game who haven't played any other game.
Right.
Sort of a maybe a tail wagging the dog scenario. It's like, all right, we have to sort of, now that we have this mobile game audience, maybe we can make a new title, have some people buy it and play that, and then that's more content for the mobile game,
That's the only thing keeping Fire Emblem around, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, I say that, but Three Houses did break a bunch of sales records too, but not pales compared to Heroes.
Right. I really wonder just what their metrics are like. This is like roughly the estimate now, like what the Saga global audience is now outside of Japan. Like, it's fascinating.
But yeah, we'll hear some impressions from that game, hopefully, next podcast. A couple other surprise announcements, not from Square Enix. JRPG-inspired Edge of Eternity, which has been in early access for a couple years now, exits and goes into full launch on PC on June 8th, alongside a PlayStation 5, PC launch is June 8th, and then in the last quarter of the year, it will also release on PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Xbox Series X and S and Xbox One. Is Adam? I know I get these two games mixed up. Is Edge of Eternity the one that debuted at China Joy a couple years ago?
That's another game.
No, that's the other one that looks the same.
That's Lost Soul aside.
Yeah, so Lost Soul Aside is like a Chinese indie game with a character that looks like knockoff Noctis, and Edge of Eternity is a French indie game with a character that looks like knockoff Noctis.
This is not the first time I've gotten them screwed up. It's not but it won't be the last. Anyways, Edge of Eternity is the one we're talking about. It's launching on June 8th for PC and later for consoles.
I mean, also to note, Lost Soul Aside seems to be just like dead in the water, where this game is actually a thing. So, it looks. You kind of have to just remember, like when you watch the trailer for this, that it is, developed by a small team. I think it's like 15 people or maybe less than that. It's tiny, and so like it's not going to have the best animations or environments, and it's a little bit janky looking. But
when I watched this and I was talking to Adam about it, my adjective was that it looks stiff. Like it just looks stiff.
It's gotten some good praise, I guess.
To like others describe it in other ways, but I don't think there are any better ways to describe it.
I think the early access has gotten some pretty good early impressions for what it's done. So maybe if you go in with the right mindset, it'll be good.
Yeah, I want to try it. I hear it's okay. Like I'm definitely interested to see. Like it's one of those games that like whenever I browse Steam, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a game. But it's still in early access. Like maybe I'll just wait on it. But it's one of those like ones that always catches my eye when I browse Steam. It's like, oh yeah, like I wanna try it out. It seems interesting.
It kind of reminds me a bit of like Outward.
Okay.
It's also it's worth mentioning. It's worth mentioning that the combat system in this game is actually kind of like, it's not an action RPG. You sort of, I don't know if you sort of just assume it is because it looks like Final Fantasy 15 or something, but it's actually kind of like a strategy RPG. Like you get into a battle and there's like a grid, and you do like attacks across the grid.
Yeah, it's a hex-based grid, not a square one.
Right. So it's got that sort of like strategic turn-based positioning style to it for the combat.
Also, I was looking at the fact sheet or the spec sheet for this game. Like Yasunori Mitsuda is also somewhat like involved in this project as well. Like he's contributed to it. I
was actually looking into that. I'm not sure if it's just one of those things where he did like the opening theme and then they can just slap his name as marketing, or if he actually did more than that. I'm not sure. It's not clear.
Yeah,
but he did at least one track, which is fun. So.
We also have another surprise RPG announcement for localization. Chinese MMO Sword of Legends Online will release in North America and Europe this year. It released in China in 2019. So it's a few years old and it's been running there since, but it is getting kind of what I assume is an unexpected English localization at some point this year to be announced. We got an announcement trailer for it as well as like a PvE overview trailer. So kind of like an underdog Wuxia. Is that how you pronounce that? MMO.
I think it's Wuxia.
From Wuxia. Okay, that makes some more sense.
It's from Gameforge, right? The publisher bringing it over.
Yep.
Yes.
Gameforge. Here's what I know about this. First of all, Gameforge is a German publisher that has done a couple of games like this. They recently, not a couple of years ago, published Kingdom Under Fire 2, which was this weird, long, dormant Korean action RPG MMO thing. It released, and I kind of haven't heard anything about it, so I don't really know what happened to it. I mean, it's still there, but it just sort of fell off my purview. I've heard a couple of not so great things about Gameforge, although I have no details. Now, this game itself, it's developed by Chinese developers, and I won't even pronounce the names, but I guess it's part of the larger series that roughly translates to Legend, or Swords of Legends, or Legendary Sword, or whatever. In Chinese, I'm going to totally mispronounce this, but it's like Gujian. And I know that series has done well. I think there was like Gujian 3 on Steam has been selling really, really well. I really apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but I guess this is maybe not like directly related, but part of that same broad umbrella. It's actually in Japan called Gujian Online. So
Well,
it's
in the
really
PR
popular
for it.
in China. If I said Japan, I meant China.
Should get on Chow on this podcast.
Yeah,
Let's get him.
we're clearly not experts at this, but it's part of that large series that seems to be popular, like very popular in China, and it's interesting that it'll get an English release. So if you're interested in playing it, and also it's actually getting like an English voiceover too, which maybe for China, they have Southeast Asian English is somewhat common in the region. So, but it's gonna have like English voiceovers and all that, as well as I think French and German translations. So it's interesting.
This game has fun classes. Like when I'm looking over, it has like 6 initial playable classes. It's not like your standard warrior or archer or wizard. This one has like Reaper, Summoner, Spell Sword, Berserker, Spearmaster, Bard. It's like, all right, sure.
It's really hard though to judge. Like, it's an MMO, like a classic, not a Destiny, like not these other like MMO other hybrid. It's everything that I'm reading about it and seeing in the 2 trailers. It is an MMO ass MMO. Like, so it's really hard to judge that. Like, qualities of MMOs are so hard to just like determine, even once you spend hundreds of hours in them, let alone like how good does this game look in trailers. It looks fine. They go over raids, they go over some of the classes. I don't know. It looks like something that I could easily see myself like just tipping my toes into it. Like, why the heck not? Let's just see what is this all about. As for the release, basically it's going to be, as far as I can see it's going to be like a buy to play. So no like sub, no free to play. Standard edition's $40, and it does have like deluxe and collector's editions.
And even that concept itself is like bold, like in this day and age, right? It's like, oh, it's not free.
Well, yeah, buy to play kind of had like its time in the sun, like maybe 10 years ago, when it's like, we don't have a subscription, just pay for the box and then microtransactions. But now it feels like it's paying for the box almost seems like a bit out of style. It's like it's free to play with microtransactions and probably an optional like premium sub or whatever. Adam, you're the one that looked over the news for this. I don't see like news about a premium sub. It looks like it's buy to play, and then I assume like a cash shop.
I didn't see anything about a subscription at all.
So it'll be interesting to see how. So that's kind of like classic on its own, just in its monetary scheme there.
Yeah.
But yep, TBA 2021. So
kind of worth mentioning here that apparently it's been a while since we've heard anything, but Amazon is bringing over Lost Ark sometime this year as well, and that's a Korean MMO that both of these games seems like they've been like in development for a long time, and it's like finally getting English releases. So we haven't heard anything about Lost Ark in a while.
I want to check out Lost Ark. That's the one that catches my eye.
That one's also being sometime this year, supposedly.
Yeah, and Amazon really wants a successful MMO, don't they?
Yeah,
they've got 2 in development, and I guess this one they're publishing. So.
Exactly.
And some smaller news to wrap out the podcast. Monster Hunter Rise has shipped 5 million copies. Last week or the week before, I think the number was 4 million. So still selling like hotcakes on one system, and it will come to others later, at least PC. So 5 million for the series. It's kind of weird because like you compare it to World, and you're like, that's a little bit slower, isn't it? But it's still like a World just kind of upped the echelon and where the series will sell, like in the West at least. So it'll be interesting to see. Like, I think James made a prediction that you think this might outsell World.
I think it's certainly possible, and it's definitely trending at least along where World was selling so far, and it's only on one platform right now. Because you have to remember that World also had Xbox sales to bolster it a bit too, at least at launch.
Yeah, it's hard to really compare because not only is it only on one platform, but there's no overlap. It's like World was not on Switch ever, and this one's only on Switch, so there's not even any, like, you have to assume some percentage of the player base is got multiple consoles on hand.
Plus, once it does come out eventually on PC, World was not a game that I would say you could run on a modest PC. It would be really, really hard to do so. But Rise, just due to the fact it's going to be a port of a Switch game, should be playable on many more PCs than World was.
That's a good point. It'll be interesting to see like how the eventual PC numbers compare to World, which ended up like breaking Capcom records on Steam and all that, like by a large margin.
Yeah, it continues to dominate, especially in Japan, like unsurprisingly.
Yeah. Shocker. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the surprise announcement of a Neptunia / Senran Kagura crossover game, action RPG, Senran Ninnin Ninja Taisen. It has a release date in Japan now. It will release on August 26th. Unfortunately, though, I don't know if anyone here is. We have a few people on staff that like the Neptunia games, but I don't know if any of us five are. I guess Josh, you played
He played
the
Virtual
PS5
Stars.
games.
I played the Neptune games and the handful of the Senran Kagura games, so like I guess I'm the most familiar, I suppose.
How does this game look, Josh? Should I be excited for this? But I hope for localization.
I don't know if this will convert you into a Neptunia and Senran Kagura Chad fan. I'm not sure.
Damn it!
But I think from what I remember from the Famitsu article that they revealed the design of the original character Yuki. They revealed aside from Asuka and Neptune as the playable characters, they also revealed Noir, Blanc, and Vert from the Neptunia series as playable.
I've never played any Neptunia games, and even I'm just like, of course, like those are 4 characters in every other single game. Why would they not be here?
And then for Senran Kagura, they have Homura, Yumi, and Miyabi, which are from the other schools in the Senran Kagura series. As you know, they're kind of like the main 4 at this point in time than Senran Kagura. So obviously, the main 4 characters from each series are playable and whatnot. I think the allure of this is from the Neptunia side. They have like all new outfits and weapons. Obviously, I think Blanc will have a staff instead of a hammer, and then Vera, of course, will have the spear because she's always wielded a spear. And then instead of a sword, Noir will have like twin sai instead as or twin blades as her weapon and whatnot. So I mean, cool. I guess I need to see more gameplay, but I mean, it'll be maybe a fun game. Who knows?
Sure. Yeah,
I do think
it's mostly just going over the character introductions with a little bit of gameplay for each.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Adam.
So as someone who's really honestly not that interested in this series, I do think it is kind of amusing how it feels like people are still waiting for a new like mainline Neptunia, and even after Virtual Stars, like, well, maybe the next one will be mainline. It's like, well, no,
this is a weird cloud title. So I mean, it's been kind of, I think, maybe this is bad to say, but I think the most amusing part from my standpoint of this reveal is like kind of the Neptunia fandom and the Senran Kagura fandom, like having to bitterly tolerate each other still, because they're kind of both a similar camps. Like, we want a new mainline game for our game, and they're kind of like stuck together now with this game. It's like, oh, I guess, and especially from the Senran Kagura side, because Takaki has like departed for Sai Games, so Honey Parade Works is still like a company, but he's not involved with them now. So they're kind of in a weird like similar scenario of like, well, I guess we'll take what we can get, right? So I don't know. Who knows? Who knows?
So for both series, it's like, this is what you get. Like it or leave it.
Right. Hopefully.
And by the way, meet your new neighbors, and they're in the same boat as you.
Yeah. And that's even like the premise of the game. Like, not necessarily that they're waiting for the mainline game, but that like the premise of the game is like that they're two separate camps, and then they meet and whatnot. So hopefully it shakes out. It controls well. Like the Senran Kagura games are generally like decent action games, if anything else,
Shifting gears entirely, we're going to talk about Mass Effect.
Oh boy.
All right, so we had already kind of learned a little bit about the details and the upcoming improvements to the upcoming Mass Effect Legendary Edition, which is only about a month away, surprisingly, May 14th. But BioWare released a blog post, which is almost fashioned like a pre-release patch notes about what has changed in a bulleted list from the original games to the remaster. Like, for instance, I'm just perusing the list now, and it's like Shepard can sprint out of combat. Melee attacks are now mapped to a button press rather than being based on proximity. Now all enemies take headshot damage. So it's kind of, it reads like patch notes. So it's like, if you have like a really good memory about exactly how Mass Effect 1 played, you can kind of read through this and be like, this is how it's different now in the in the remaster. And then, of course, the blog post, which we've linked on our news post as well, does give a little bit more context to like why things have changed, what their goal was, make it more consistent from game to game, etc. So some of these stuff has already been like mentioned, but now it's just kind of like detailed out and really delineated into.
One change that actually was like the most interesting to me was in Mass Effect. So Mass Effect 1 obviously changed the most, but in Mass Effect 1 there are a few locations that kind of have these winding paths and walls in your way, and apparently that was very deliberate, because at the time they didn't want to like render the whole area all at once because it would impact performance. So they've had like walls and stuff put in the way, so you kind of have to go around, snake around to get to where you want. And in this remaster, they literally just took some walls out. Like, hey, we can render the whole area at once now. No reason to have you have like these snaking paths around, staircases and whatnot. And it's just one of those things like you don't really expect that as like a common remaster change. Like, oh, I guess that makes sense though, that you can do that, and it's obviously probably for the better to get around more easily. So that was probably like the singular most interesting thing.
I was gonna mention the exact same thing before you did, because IGN has like a really nice like comparison video where they kind of have a feature around it, and that was one of the main bullet points. Like at some part of the Citadel in Mass Effect 1, like when you exit the elevator, there's like just a wall in your way, and it's like, and you have to get around that wall to like go like explore this room in the Citadel, and like that was like always like a weird like structure or like instance in that game. It's like, okay, well, I guess, and having like a BioWare level designer explain like why that was back then and why they can just like get rid of that wall now, it's like, okay, cool, sweet, and they also like detailed like more like subtle changes, like in the hangar, the Mako hangar, there's like new lighting structures to like give more light to that room and whatnot.
The Mako has new thruster jets,
right? And and some of the like just vanity things around like the Citadel, like the couches are like more lively. Like there's like red cushions on
cushions.
Yeah. Woo!
It was like before, it was just like a literally like a stone bench, and it's like, no, we have cushions on the bench.
Some of the stuff that I'm reading through this, I'm like, I forgot that it worked like that. Like touching lava is no longer an instant mission failure. It just deals damage over time. Like, oh, I had forgotten about that. Either that or I never stepped in lava. But apparently it just instantly ended the mission before, and now it doesn't.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah,
I've heard such bad things about those sections of the game that, like, I'm kind of glad that it's been edited. And that's like simplistic as
no, that's fine. It works. And there's also some things that like are almost so like basic that I almost wouldn't have thought of them. But like, for instance, in the original trilogy, FemShep, a female Commander Shepard, was always possible, but wasn't really like a marketing focus until the third game where they kind of redesigned her. So they said like the design for Mass Effect 3 is now the default, though the original is also available. They all talked about the achievements that like have been unified across the trilogy so that they carry over from game to game instead of having like the same achievement segmented in different places. So like just stuff like that where it's like, that makes sense. These are all things that they had to consider now that they have them all under like a unified launcher now. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to the most, is just having all three games in one neat, tidy package, with the only thing missing is Pinnacle Station, which we talked about previously, that they just lost the source code, which is kind of like bummer. But other than that, looks like it's shaping up to be quite comprehensive.
I think one of the neat like not additions but like implementations into the Legendary Edition as well is that they're bringing over that Mass Effect Genesis comic by Dark Horse into the experience. So like if you for some reason you don't want to play the first one, you just want to go into the second or third one, they still have those comics that like you can make those key critical decisions. So you can still make the decisions that you wanted from the previous game, but without actually playing it. So if you just want to jump into like later Mass Effects, but still have decisions.
I'm trying to remember the order of events of that. It's because Mass Effect 2 released on the other consoles before Mass Effect 1 got off. It was only on Xbox for the longest time.
Yeah.
So they did the comic as kind of like a band-aid for like, oh yeah, you can play through the sequel. Just read the comic first. And now it's kind of like you could argue, well, that's completely not necessary, but it's just kind of nice. Like, why not? We'll include it. It's part of the Mass Effect history, so we'll put it in our package here. Like,
yeah, it's a legacy thing.
Like
it's preserved in that way. Yeah, it's cool.
The only other game-specific announcement I have right now is that the Diablo II Resurrected Edition is in like a technical alpha right now. You have to have opted in to like receive updates for that, and I guess a few were selected to play it
Or be a
Not
VTuber.
us.
or be a VTuber. I was not and am not, so I'm not playing that. But
YouTuber, Brian.
sorry, I don't mean to let you guys down, but that's going on right now. That's a game I'm excited for coming out this year.
It was really nice for the streams I've watched of it. Like the way they did the instant toggle between legacy graphics and the updated stuff is so smartly implemented. Like that's so cool.
It looks absolutely great. I'm not going to play it for personal reasons, but it does look fantastic.
It's Vicarious Visions on that, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
They're on the Diablo. Yeah, I think so.
They could be making Tony Hawk.
Hey man, I really like Diablo 2, so
I like Tony Hawk.
I'm
Yes.
sorry. I'll take it.
I'll take it.
I wanna play the shit out of this.
The very last news bit I have here is concerning E3 2021. Ooh.
Oh boy.
They have confirmed that this year it will be a digital only event again, to I think no one's real surprise.
Well, again, did anybody even
I guess not again. Sorry, that was just me misspeaking. I was just thinking like last year, but no, it did not even happen last year. A bunch of proto E3 substitutes happened, but not E3 proper. But yeah, okay. Let me restart.
I think
E3
one thing about
2021
this
is a digital event this year. All right, go ahead, Adam.
I think one part about this that I think sometimes the ESA just forgets is that most people who watch and pay attention to E3, it's always been a digital event. So
yeah, basically.
it's obviously for people like us who have been there in person and can do interviews and meet with other journalists and meet with developers and things like that, it's a little different. But to a lot of just like the potentially hundreds of thousands of people that watch it, if it's just going to be presentations and conferences and streams, that's kind of what it's always been.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people like watching it, like the E3 experience is just like the ESA hitting play on the video for some of these companies. It's like here it is,
So obviously details are pretty light right now, but they did give us a list of participating companies. Capcom, Koch Media, Konami, Nintendo, Microsoft, Take-Two, Ubisoft, Warner Bros., with the expected absence of Sony, as they were even way back in 2019. So
Sony.
Yeah, there's like the initial like partners list, so there might be more partners in the coming months to participate as well. And they also have E3 will still happen like behind the scenes as well to like media partners like the week before, I think. I forgot the exact dates.
They have it on their press list where the schedule says June 7th through 11th are the pre-E3 media days. We don't have any idea what those are yet, like what that means, what that is, just that it's scheduled.
Yeah, there's like no way they're like doing this in person. So I imagine they're like doing it through either Zoom calls or through some other method where like they're just gonna try to sort out like demos, I guess. Instead of like doing it in person, they're doing it digitally. So I imagine all the extra days is kind of like compensating for any technical hindrances they might run across, because setting these up like in person is like easy peasy, but relative to like digital where anything can happen, like connection screw ups or like maintenance periods for like the tech and whatnot. So I imagine that's why there's such a big buffer for this now.
And then June 12th through 15th is the E3 broadcast period, and not much detail to go on. They just say virtual streams and announcements available online through all major video platforms, as well as through the portal and supporting mobile app.
Yeah, so that's like the inverse now, where like the actual E3 proper is happening over the course of a weekend instead of like weekdays, where like the exhibition period is like done for like Wednesday through Friday. Now it's like actually like Friday through to Sunday or something. So, yeah, sure, I guess we'll see what happens. To a lot of people, like on the outside, like E3 is like a recognizable brand to get excited over. Obviously, like the key part of E3, the why E3 is valuable is lost as being a digital only event, because E3 in person is like a good spot where like like the entire industry is just like in one spot for like a good week. So like any contacts that you need to like meet up with or catch up with or set up meetings around that would be normally hard geographically is valuable in that E3 period when everyone is there in person.
You're kind of
organic
dancing around
networking.
it, but there's a lot of like literally like publisher developer business like meetings and agreements that happen at E3 as well. Obviously, those are not privy to the public or even to a lot of the media there, but obviously that happens. When people are going to be all in one spot, there's a whole room of office cubicles where these meetings take place, and so that's not going to be at a digital event. So
yeah, so
and it's one of those things where it's like, ESA has obviously had a lot of baggage and a lot of stuff to deal with in terms of data security and all that stuff. And should we be excited about them trying to trudge through E3 in some fashion?
I guess
I'm kind of like yes. ... question mark. Like,
now that you mentioned it, it is valuable to mention that they also came out and said that like every element of like the E3 like front facing is like free. This time around, there's like no premium pass or anything that they're gonna try to like. There's like no fees to like access what they want to like share to the public in this. So, okay, sure.
One last line here that's a bit curious is they're saying like this will pave the way for more in 2022 when E3 will encompass a full 360-degree interactive digital and in-person event. Like what does 360-degree digital event mean? It's just like it'll be even more digital.
Like the streams for E3 next year, they're gonna be 360 degrees. So
they're gonna do that sort of thing where they like take a multi-dimensional camera and walk around the show floor and then
Google
create like a virtual space. Yeah. And you can like, hey, you can visit the Capcom booth digitally or whatever.
It's like
you can wait in line digitally.
Yeah. You ever wanted to simulate how you waiting to play a game for 6 hours at home?
No. But obviously, we're going to be looking forward to some of the excitement on it. Some of the like, there is no Square Enix mentioned yet. Hopefully, they have a presence there because they only the last couple of years, like 2018, 2019, started doing their own thing, and a lot of announcements there. So that's where like Tifa was revealed for 7 Remake and all that.
They have their Square Enix Directs, like a separate. So I mean, why even?
Yeah.
Like
I know a lot of people are interested in like the Square Enix Japan side, but they announced Life is Strange 3 in one of their own directs, and that's
they did
probably going to be a really successful title for them. So
they did mention that. I forget. I know at the end of that direct that it was in early March that they mentioned another one was coming. Did they give a window, or did they just say like?
I think they just said like later.
All right. They said summer, but I'm not sure.
Summer. Yeah.
Well, just like Nintendo can do a direct anytime, but then they always had the E3 direct. So hopefully that something else that kind of lines up.
I wonder if Nintendo's E3 presence is going to be where they announce the long rumored Switch Pro.
Ooh, that'd be cool. Like I think even though like Sony's obviously not there, I imagine they'll capitalize on like the E3. Well, who knows what Sony's doing at the moment anyway, but maybe they'll be like, oh well, it's E3 time, so we'll do our state of play like close to it. Like that's what I imagine.
Yeah.
Now.
I think right now Sony just needs some distance and time from the press they're getting. Please forget about us for now.
But that's always the big thing about like putting out an E3 date is at least people who aren't like directly involved with E3 at least have like a time period of like, okay, well we'll announce our stuff like the week before E3 happens. That's what's been happening like prior to like what COVID was happening is like usually the week before E3 was like for a lot of like smaller third-party publishers, it's like that's the time we'll reveal stuff. So at least we aren't caught in this weird maelstrom of like E3 news. Like there will be at least eyes on us. But so like people are still attentive, but it's not like the main E3 thing. But we still have eyes on us before E3 happens.
I think people sometimes forget that, like for example, EA the last few years has had EA Play that literally runs like the same dates as E3. is like a couple blocks away from the E3 place, but it's technically not affiliated at all. It's just like, hey, we're just gonna kind of, piggyback
It's
off
not
of you
even
guys
a
here
few
while
blocks
people are
away.
paying
It's
attention.
literally a block away.
Yeah. I was gonna say a block, but I kind of softened myself. Like it's very close, but it's technically not at E3. It's just at the same time in pretty much the same place.
In person, they're convenient because there's good spots to eat between E3, the E3 and the EA place. So it's like if you want to go there, it's like okay, we can go eat there then. Man, I miss my the joint that I hang out at E3, like the good like bar to eat. I miss that.
I can't
spot.
wait. Next year's our year, guys. Next year's the RPG site. I say reunion. Next year is the time I meet you guys, but this year, sadly not.
We'll see. We'll see if it's safe. Like hopefully it is. We'd love to, chat, like get together and whatnot.
Live Tetracast.
I know we're a broken record. That's actually not off the table. That's a possibility, but it'd be more than a year away from now. But we're a broken record, but we have obviously E3 is like the perfect time for most of our staff to get together and meet each other in person. So that's always kind of a highlight for us specifically.
I'm always going to remember how I met most of the RPG site crew because like there's a Zero Escape themed escape room thing around that time, and that a good chunk of us at that time met each other and like through that like a good icebreaker.
That was your icebreaker. Yep.
Yeah. I remember when I met Josh at E3 a couple of years ago. Like he kind of knew what I looked like because he had met Brian at that point. Like, hey, I just look like him, so just come meet me. I don't know what you look like. So,
Adam and I are brothers, and we look alike. Is the context there?
All right.
It's like, oh, you must be Adam. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, with that wraps up everything we had to talk about. So we still had a good full podcast where we got to talk about a couple of cool games. Seems like the highlights this week were Disco Elysium and Fantasian. So give those a try if you can, because they seem like they're both really good, especially in the case of Disco. Like,
you don't even need to wait for it. Maybe wait for it.
Yeah, I guess there is still a caveat on that one too. Like maybe give it a month. But of course, we have the videos like the review up on our YouTube channel at RPGsite.net. We have all the features, including the Valhalla written review, up at RPGsite.net. You can follow us on Twitter at RPGsite. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify or Google Podcasts or iTunes. I believe all three are possible. And we also have our casual mode video series up on our YouTube channel as well. The last game that we did look at was Romancing Saga 3. So we kind of did that in preparation of sorts before the upcoming Saga Frontier Remastered. And other than that, stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you next time.